Well. How you doing?
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
How you doing?
Good. I'm good.
That song's long.
Such a long song. Who in their right mind would write a 5-minute long song?
James Taylor. Harry Chapin. Greg Patterson. Oh my goodness, Greg Patterson. Is that the Greg Patterson that I might know? No, it isn't.
It's time.
It's time, folks. We're on. Not only are we on the Drum Geek channel, which, by the way, I'm PJ from Drum Geek. This guy is who?
Sean
from Drum Geek.
from Drum Geek.
From Drum Geek. We're waiting for the man of the hour, Aaron. He's running a little late. But
Neither
he'll
of
be
us
here.
are Aaron.
In case you're wondering, if
He
you
has
guys
more
are big,
hair than us.
if you're a big fan of Aaron, we're not him.
We're not him.
In case you're wondering,
We don't,
both
we don't have enough hair.
both of our drum talents, though, combined equal half of his. No offense to yourself.
Yeah. I can count to 4.
You can count to 4. That's it.
I can count to 4.
Well, maybe we should be doing some 13 and a half tunes. Oh, I love it. So we'll wait for Aaron to show up. In the meantime, if you're in chat, feel free to say hello. Tell us where you're from, what's going on. Have you ever had strawberries with pepper on it? Maybe that's something we should talk about.
Strawberries with pepper, like cracked pepper?
Yeah, the last Retrologist stream I did.
Yeah.
We have a good friend of ours who's a chef, and he was recommending the strawberries with a little bit of cracked pepper on top of it, and it's suspiciously good. Has anybody had that?
I had a salad with strawberries in it, and I know I put pepper on it.
Yeah, see, it all goes together at some point.
Probably inadvertently, I had a strawberry with pepper on it.
Unintentionally, but I think if you extrapolate everything from the salad individually, at some point the combinations go well together. Much like drumming, I guess. Drumming, one hand, great. 2 hands, sure. 1 hand, 1 foot. All the combinations create rhythms that are equally cool. So we've established that salads can be broken down the same way drum beats can.
Absolutely. Salad is like drumming.
Okay. Why are we talking about strawberries? You showed up at the right time because we are known to banter a bit at the beginning while we're waiting for some people to show up. Aaron's going to show up, Chris. Don't worry. Aaron's going to be here in a minute. Aaron's running a little late. He might have I don't want to blow any type of surprise, but he might have something to tell us when he shows up. But he's running a couple minutes late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he's running a couple minutes late, but he'll be here. Don't worry.
We're padding the time.
Yeah. When Aaron gets here, are you guys going to have some questions for him? I guess is the question.
Probably.
The question is, are you going to have questions? What do we want to know? Hey, Chris, Mr. Chris Hunter, what do you want to know from Aaron when he shows up? Is there
he wants to know where he is.
Secret? Well, other than where he is. Sure. But what is it about Aaron? What is it about Aaron? I've certainly known him a long time. Well, not a long time. Maybe 8 years. 9 years? Yeah. And he is a super rad guy. Not only is he a good drummer, because we know that sometimes you can be a great drummer but be a jerk, and you can be a jerk and not be a drummer.
Yeah.
I guess combination exists.
You can be a drummer and not like strawberries.
Yeah, true.
You can be a drummer and like strawberries.
Yep. Yeah, you're right.
So you've known Aaron for how long?
I feel like I've known him, and that was one of the questions I wanted to kind of spark with him tonight. Is how long have I known him? When was one of the first times I met him? I think I have an idea. I think I have an idea of one of the first times I met him. But yeah, I'm hoping he remembers, and if he doesn't, I won't be insulted. Totally.
I don't know Aaron at all.
Guy. Have you met Aaron at any drum festivals or anything? No.
I think we've been at the same festival a couple of times, but we've never actually met.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll just say it. When I was at Roland, we did a lot of content with him, and one piece in particular was when we launched the TD25 drum kit. He was a part of the marketing on that, and it was really cool to hang out with him here in Vancouver while he was creating some TD25 Roland content. Yeah, that's a great question, Greg. Does he still teach at Drumeo? Um, we'll find that out. The answer, if we follow his Instagram, is yes. But let's find out how much he's doing at Drumeo. So that's a great question.
Yeah.
What is he doing at Drumeo? Because I think part of what he's doing there is coaches. Their coaches program at Drumeo, which is very, very cool.
Yeah. He's been there. He's been at Drumeo for quite a while, hasn't he?
That's correct. Yeah. Seems
And
like
he
all the reasons coming to Vancouver here is always for Drumeo, which is nice.
Right. And he was one time he worked for Drums Etc. If everyone remembers that
Really?
publication, yeah, from Ralph Angelillo.
Yeah.
He published Drums Etc. And I think Aaron worked there, or
Yep.
was the editor.
He's certainly done lots of writing.
Mhm.
And here, let's pull it up here. Doot, by the way, is the thing. But here's Aaron's Instagram, because he was just doing. Yeah, I was just trying to remember if he's doing with Modern Drummer. Yeah, he is. So everybody, get your questions together. Oh, here we go. Here's the question. Question of the hour. How do you play something like 13/16 and 15/16, etc.? I'm familiar with playing in 8, but I was listening to for fifth, and I was curious how it's counted. It's a mix of 17, 15, 13, and 8. Brilliant. Yeah, let's get him to break that down. I'm going to take note of that.
That's a very good question.
Yeah, Aaron is, I'm going to put this away because we'll look at it later. Aaron and I have the bit of an inside joke that anytime I'm listening to a song that's in a super odd time signature, or if there's something rhythmical that I think is just like, I'm trying to break it down, I'll just text him, and somehow he'll just like write it on a napkin. He's like, oh, this is how it goes, by the way. Oh, the Genesis song. Oh, that makes much more sense. I'm sorry. Yeah. For some reason, I thought it was a Third Ion tune. Yeah, he's notorious for like just writing it down, like on whatever happens to be in front of him and texting it to me. And he's a little like, oh, you didn't know that? That's, by the way, that's the counting for that, by the way.
Yeah, I think if you take the time and sit with, I know whenever I've played in odd time signatures or made one of the songs I've recorded recently was I wanted to do something in 5, but coming out of and going into a like 4.
Yes.
Just to create kind of a discordant feel. And it took me some time to try and figure out like even how many bars I should do of the 5, or should I count it as like a 10 over something. And then of course when you're dealing with my wife is a piano player, so we had to sit down and figure out the melody. Could we extrapolate the melody over 5? Would that make sense?
Yeah. Are you
It's
going
kind of like
are you going over bar lines at that point? And you're right. Does it become a bar of 10? Yeah.
Much like the way that Bonham and Page did it in Kashmir, where Jimmy was counting in 5 and John just counted in 4.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right. And but it still works over the
Syncopation
long haul. It still works, but it melodically didn't matter that John wasn't playing in 5.
Understood.
Whereas in my case, it did matter to my wife's piano part. So
does odd time signatures intimidate you a tiny bit, or what? Wait, let me spell Aaron's name right. Aaron Edgar.
Aaron.
Yeah, Aaron. Sorry, you're right. Coming up soon. There you go.
You ever feel like the warm up act sometimes?
It's what I do with all the other projects. You basically become warm up acts for that matter. How does everybody know Aaron? I guess is the question. Is it mostly from Drumeo? Are there anybody who follows him through any musical projects that he played in? Any touring? Has anybody ever gotten a photo with him and noticed how tall his hair is a lot of the time? Whenever he spikes it up, it looks super rad. I guess that's the question.
If Aaron would hear it, he would tell you that. It would be really good.
Yeah, I guess so.
Um, have you ever tried doing that very thing to your beard, PJ? The spiking thing? Yeah.
Yeah, I have. This is just Drumeo?
Just Drumeo.
Just do Drumeo. Cool. Yeah. That's a Genesis song. Yeah, I know. There we go. This is unkempt, I think is the term. Is that the term? Unkempt.
Gotcha.
I don't know what to do. I put oils in it, and I put beard stuff in it, and it's just questionable at times. And I keep getting tagged in photos actually recently of other bearded people, because I don't know if you know, during this pandemic, everybody's been growing a beard. Everybody.
I guess I didn't get them.
Maybe not you, but everybody's grown a beard, and now suddenly, if it's salt and pepper, everybody's been like tagging me in Instagram posts, just going, "Hey, is this you, PJ?" Right. And I'm like, "No, I'm sorry, I'm not an 80-year-old painter from Italy."
Gotcha.
Sorry. I can see how you can make that mistake, but no, not the case.
I guess, is anyone here from Winnipeg? That's where he's from, right, Aaron?
Go for it.
Yeah. I assume maybe. Yeah. I used to live near Winnipeg. That's why I ask. 2022.
Aaron on YouTube 2012. Oh, totally right. Any Sonar players out there as well? Like
other than Greg?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I play Sonar. I'm an Ascentman. I like the Ascent
I had
series.
The best kit I've ever used was a Force 3007 kit.
I had that as well. Yep.
And I swear to God, I was at a gig, and like there was another kit. It was like a DW or something, and it sounded not even near as nice. Yes. And the drum tech on the gig we were playing around with my kit, and he said, "Can we just use your kit? It's just way easier to keep it." But then he explained to me a few things about Sonar and why they're kind of so much better than a lot of kits.
Have you been to the factory?
No, I've never been. I was supposed to go once.
I did.
And then the guitar player that worked in our store ended up going instead. Okay. And I launched a ferocious protest, but I didn't go.
Oh, that's sad.
But what the tech told me was that the thing about Sonar is that they while they do have factories for their more economical lines overseas in Asia, their entire engineering system, the machines and the engineers go to the factory where this factory is built in China, and they show the workers how they do things. Yes. So he said you could have like even the 2007, the 1007 series. This was back when those were around.
Yes.
And they would be component wise probably more economical. They wouldn't be the SQ2 series, but the way they're machined and the way that they're put on, the way that they're dealt with is no different than the high-end series.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
And that's why they're, in his opinion,
and it's inspected as well, which is really cool. And we discovered exactly that even if they're made not in Germany, they are shipped to Germany.
Yes.
And they are inspected, boxed, repackaged, and shipped everything is shipped from there.
Yeah. And very few companies do that. Very few companies do that, if any.
And if anybody ever is in the area there and does get a tour, when I was there, oh my God, that sounds arrogant for me to say, but when I was there, there was this old lady. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Sean, but we were walking through, and there's this older lady like putting the rivets on like a cymbal stand. And that was her job. Like if she didn't show up to work that day, like those things weren't getting done type thing. Right. And it was really cool to see like the faces of not just like young sprite guy. Like, I'm working for a drum company. Look at me. I'm doing my thing. It's awesome. Yeah. It's like people that have been with the company for 50 years or been with the company for, an extended amount of time that are part of the family that play an integral role in the creation of those drums, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Aaron says he's home now, so he's
that's great.
He's heading down right now.
There.
He's almost here, folks. He's almost here. Yeah, the Sonar Factory was super, super fun. And that little town that it's in is treated very much like a mining community, kind of, with the utmost respect, you know what I mean? Like where everybody in that town has some association with the factory.
And it's been there for like 100 years, hasn't it?
No, it's been there for a long time. I don't know how long, but yeah.
Wow.
The production of Sonar drums in particular is very cool and very respected, for sure.
And that's not like those aren't tours that you can get privately. Those are kind of done through the music retail program.
I don't know if that's true. I think that if you
really?
happen to be swinging through that area and you'd like a bit of a tour, I think
they'll do it.
They'll do it. Don't quote me on that, but it seemed pretty open that they've got two sections. They've got a bit of a museum where if you go to the factory, you can at least walk through and see the history of all the different drum kits that have been created over all the years.
Yep.
And then, yeah, I think that you absolutely can kind of negotiate, but you can talk about getting a tour. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's in a small town. Let me get the.
Yeah, it's actually really, really small. It's near the Black Forest, correct?
That I can't quote you on. So
okay.
It's in a. It's funny because we landed at the airport, and then we took the Autobahn there, and I just remember, I remember looking. Okay, quick side story.
We've got time.
We've got a bit of time here, and maybe and Aaron could probably add to this, but I remember getting in the shuttle because they were taking me from the airport to the Sonar Factory, and we had to go on the Autobahn. And I remember having my iPad and me just reading from my iPad for about maybe, I don't know, half an hour or so, and then I look up and I look out the window and I'm like, we're going suspiciously fast. Like this feels like we're going fast. What? And I kind of yell up, are we going fast? And somebody in the front is like, oh, we're going 200, by the way. Kilometers an hour.
In the bus?
Yeah, in the bus. 200.
Did we find the name of the town?
Oh, sorry, I got distracted.
Yeah.
And it was, pretty ridiculous. But yeah, driving very fast was just no big deal. That's fine. Beach. Oh, why is it leaving? Sonar. German musical instruments. Oh. We'll wait for Aaron to give me an idea. Student of Carl Orff. Because I actually forget the name of the small little city. History of the company official website. There we go. Let's see. Sonar history. I'm going to know it when I see it.
Bad Berlberg?
Yes, thank you. Where did you find that? Yes.
I just Googled it.
Oh, you Googled Bad Berlberg. Perfect. That's exactly where it was.
A few hours north of Frankfurt.
Yes. That's where it was. Super small little town. Stumbling distance to a couple local pubs and this Sonar factory in the middle of it.
I heard the tour for the music retail people involved quite a bit of beer.
Yep.
Yeah,
it was. Oh, the man of the man is here. Oh.
Yeah, he's getting his camera set up.
He's being a cool guy.
It's like Sabian's in Meductics. That's kind of the same sort of deal. It's a really small town.
Small town vibe, and it's got kind of like the beer factories, or I say like the mining factories. Like everybody in the town has some type of relationship. Like generations have all worked there in one way or another. Yeah, to be a part of it. Yeah, but that was a really, really good experience, and it really stamped home my love of Sonar drums in particular, which is
nice. Which is why you play them.
Well, I'm not exclusive, but I do.
But
enjoy
still,
Sonar drums.
They fed you beer. They fed you beer, so you play their kits. Come on, face
it. Well, just so you know, that's all you need to do to gain my loyalty is to buy me beer. and
Or
also
yeah.
pour it into my face.
Yeah.
That's all you need
I've
to do.
proven that hundreds of times with you.
You really have. Great. Okay, so everybody, thanks for hanging out. Aaron, you're familiar with Bad Berlberg, right? You're familiar with that place. Oh, maybe he is. That's how we do. How about this? Aaron, could you tell me if you've ever had strawberries with pepper on them?
Strawberries with pepper? Not that I know of. I don't think so.
No?
No, man.
It's pretty good. It's surprisingly good.
What kind of pepper are you using? Like a hot pepper, or just like a little bit
like
of a tinge?
I like it. It is going to be not the pepper sauce that you think. Like, it could. Oh my God! Now you're blowing my mind. Like, are you thinking like chili flakes? Are you thinking like chili flakes type pepper?
Well, I don't know. I mean, peppers range from like ghost peppers and crazy shit like that to like things that are a little bit more mild, just like a little bit of a tinge, you know.
Let me clarify something. Just ground pepper.
Okay.
Pepper. Just ground pepper.
I was getting all exotic on top of this. No, I haven't had that.
But now you got me all like Tabasco sauce on. Is that where you're going with this? Like,
well, there's lots of cool things. There's lots of crazy hot sauces out there that you can get with like cool berries and shit. Like,
yes,
you could probably pair some really cool.
Yeah,
things
definitely.
With that.
Yep, absolutely.
Aaron, you're blowing my mind. Let's cut to the chase here. Are you in a position where you could kind of announce why you were a little late? Is it a big deal or not a big deal?
Yeah, it's not a big deal. I mean, I've been looking for a new car for the past couple of months, and I just found a sweet VW. It's like a 2010 Tiguan. Just buying a used thing, but like it's in this really dope purple. Kind of looks like that Love Custom snare up there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great. Thing drove awesome. Pretty low kilometers on it, and it's like fairly reasonably priced. Yeah, I'm super happy with it.
The purple is what got me. I'm a big purple man.
As soon as
I love
it, I
purple.
was just like, that's the one.
Man. Before we get too far, Aaron, I want you to meet Sean. Sean,
hey, man. Nice to actually meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Sean's the main man of Drum Geek, formerly Black Page, and
cool. Yeah.
And he feels like he's rubbed shoulders with you at one point during some drum festival in one way or another. But we're notorious.
You look
for
real
that.
familiar. Where would that have been? I mean, we've probably both been to just so many of those things.
Well, I mean, I grew up in Brandon, so I mean, I've been to some events in Winnipeg, and then think probably through the Victoria Drum Fest would have been another time, but I don't recall exactly.
Okay, yeah, I played that once in, I want to say 2015, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I would have been there. I was there. I was in China in 2017, so yeah, that would have been probably another time.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cross paths, yeah.
We
probably know a lot of drummers. Like we each probably know similar guys. So
yeah, that's cool that you're from Brandon. Did you spend much time in Winnipeg?
Yeah. I studied with Mitch in Winnipeg, and I knew
sick.
Chris. I knew Suds really well, and
Nice.
I studied with Tim for a little while.
Cool.
And who else?
You're saying all these first names that nobody in chat. Everybody's like, "Oh, classic Tim."
Yeah, Winnipeg people know exactly.
Oh yeah. Oh, Mitch and Tim. Oh my goodness, I remember those guys.
Yeah, the one Tim. You know.
Exactly. Yeah. Is that what it feels like? And like, this is my ignorance, is that I'm not familiar enough with Brandon or Winnipeg. But is there like one PJ? Is there one AA Ron? Is there one Cian? What's the deal here?
It's not that small. I mean, it's like probably like 750,000 or something like that in Winnipeg. So I mean, it's a city, but like it's small enough that it kind of feels like a small town. If you're talking about like drummers that are actually like someone in the scene, yeah, we could probably get down to a first name basis.
Yeah. Oh, see, that's what I was kind of curious about. Sorry to take a sidestep here. Is that being from Winnipeg, and I hope nobody's, including you, obviously going to take offense to that, is that it's not, I feel like it's not like major city like Toronto or Vancouver or California, LA or something like that. But you've really put yourself out there digitally. You make yourself available digitally. How do you put yourself out for in-person gigs? Like, you're ready to travel. What's your challenges on that?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Like, I mean, you're right. Winnipeg isn't like that level of big city. But one thing that's cool about Winnipeg is that it's got like a pretty vibrant music scene. Like there's tons of people that play, and there's tons of people that are like really excellent at what they do. So there is like a vibrant live scene. Like you can go out and be a professional gigging musician. I shouldn't say easily, that's obviously not the right word, because there's, you know, lots of things you got to accomplish to sort of get that happening. But there's a lot of us that play professionally here. I don't honestly find too many challenges with that. Like I spent basically my entire adult life as a professional musician here in Winnipeg. At some point I decided to start doing the YouTube stuff because I was just into quintuplets and weird things that most people didn't want to play with. So I kind of just wanted an outlet for it. That's how that thing started. And I ended up getting like the gig with Modern Drummer and the gig with Drumeo. And I mean, now I'm like full-time salaried at Drumeo. So I've actually somehow made a career off being this sort of like rhythm weirdo, which is just like an anomaly in and of itself.
Yeah, so that's a great segue, is that you've really doubled down on being, and you even refer to like alien, your alien prog. Like you've doubled down on, excuse the expression, but weirdness and odd timing. Like you're the guy to go for that, and that makes you valuable in my opinion, especially as a coach, for Drumeo, or as a writer for Modern Drummer, for anybody, is that you can speak genuinely about that. Do you find that you're the guy that people are going to?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of interesting. I was just talking to my buddy that I was driving out to check the car with. We had a very similar conversation where when I was starting to explore that stuff online, there kind of wasn't really, I shouldn't say anybody, but there was very few people doing that kind of stuff. So it actually just kind of was like a right place, right time for me, just, you know, going on this exploration of this kind of weird stuff I found fascinating. That kind of made me the guy. Like when you're sort of like, again, I don't want to say I'm the first person to do this stuff. It couldn't be further from the truth, but like one of the first ones to really kind of do it online and just go wholeheartedly with it. That was the basis of me being able to get these opportunities.
Do you find, sorry, Sean, I'm steamrolling. If you got questions, jump in. But do you find, Aaron, that prog, quote unquote, over all these years has progressed to the point where it is kind of weird? And let me give you a small example. J6 Studios asked before you showed up this question: how do you play something like 13, 16, 15, 16? I'm familiar with playing an 8, but I was listening to Fifth. I was curious how it's counted. It's a mix of 17, 15, 13, and 8. So the fact that we're even having that discussion, which by the way you can answer if you want, but the fact that we're even having that discussion from the early days of prog is super different. Like the definition of prog has changed so much. How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel like prog at its heart is kind of, at least this is how I feel about it. It's sort of music where there kind of aren't rules. Like obviously there's rules that we play by as musicians when we play with each other. But prog is kind of like where you can bend these rules and play with things that are stylistically taboo. So I don't know, I think in the spirit of prog, this is just kind of like where it goes. And I mean, playing in like odd time signatures like that is far from new. Like we've had bands like, I mean, even Rush back in the 70s were doing it. So, I mean, that's been kind of pioneered for a long time. Like things obviously have progressed. There's been strides that have gone on both melodically and rhythmically with how kind of prog is now, at least in a popular sense. But I kind of think I ran a little bit off topic on there, but that's sort of like where my head's at with it.
No, I think you were right on topic, as a matter of fact, because Rush, the way that Rush did prog, or the way that Genesis did prog, or the way that Third Ion does prog are very, very different. And I just want a little bit of education maybe on my end, is that back in the day, Metallica was metal, and now it's super tame. That's just, it feels like it's just rock. You know?
Totally.
And so when does the definition of like prog back in the day suddenly become something a little different than what prog is now? The definition, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm not quite sure how we would change the definition. Again, I feel like the spirit of what is prog hasn't changed, but it's like what we're doing with it has evolved. Like back when Rush was doing what Rush did, it was groundbreaking. It was new. People weren't really listening to music like that. And again, this isn't to say that they were the first people to play with time signatures like that. Like look back at classical music. Like
for sure,
those kind of compositions
take 5
have been
enough.
Totally. Right?
Yeah.
lots of crazy stuff had been going on, but it just became, people were getting a little bit more used to it. And as that happens and it becomes normalized for the next generation, they're like, how do I push this? How do I make it different? How do we make it crazier? Not that being crazier is the goal, but when you're appreciating music on a sense of it being, I like to think about it as like rhythmically adventurous.
Good.
You don't want to keep doing the things that have been done. You're like, okay, how do I adventure further? Like, that's why I got into quintuplets. That's why I was like, okay, this stuff, I don't really hear it anywhere, but I'm fascinated by it. So, well, I guess I better just start figuring out how to do it.
Yeah.
But
And that's
I would
why
say,
Third Ion uses it a lot, you know?
Right.
I would interject too that Portnoy made the distinction. He doesn't see metal and prog as the same genre. Like there's metal and there's prog, but there's also prog metal.
Yeah.
So
Right,
it's not exclusive just to metal. And in fact, I think, like Aaron said, in a lot of genres, progressive music was around. I mean, jazz was progressive in many ways.
Oh,
a
great
lot
point.
of jazz genres were very progressive, and in fact,
Absolutely.
almost to a state of riot. I think it was, I forget, it was the Rites of Spring actually did cause a riot back in the 1700s.
Sure.
Again, because of this
Yeah.
discordant chords, and it was not cool.
Yeah,
But
it was almost
very
like
ahead of its
considered
time.
blasphemy, you know?
Yeah, it was. It
Yeah.
was back when music was still akin to a musician being next to God. It was prog was happening back then.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And it also is a very specific type of audience as well, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
and I'll say this lightly, but I went to a Dream Theater concert, for example. I went to a Dream Theater show, and I just remember, like, well, okay, let me give you two examples. I went to like a Matchbox 20 show. It was good, by the way, but please don't judge me on that. Anyways, I went to a Matchbox 20 show. It was great.
They're good at what they do.
It was like early 2000s, but I went, and afterwards, everybody's like, "Oh, that was some good music. Good job. It was awesome." And then you go to your car and you're singing Matchbox 20 tunes. Cool. But I found that during the intermission at a Dream Theater concert, everybody goes outside with their beer and they're like, "Did you see Petrucci like totally screw up that bar 13 of? Oh my god, it's horrendous. Oh my god, Mangini. I don't know if he was a good fit for this band. It's terrible. But I just found like judgy eyes were on everything, and truthfully, same. I was like watching Mangini because it was right as Mangini joined the band. It was one of his first shows, and I was like eyeballing him, and I'm like, oh, it's one of his first shows. He's gonna mess up. It's gonna be great. But like drummer to drummer, I'm judging him heavily, and I felt kind of bad afterwards, but then realized everybody in the room was judging everybody on stage.
Well,
Is that the culture?
I mean, kind of, but I don't really want to say it like that. I think
sure.
music like this, any sort of music that takes things out of what would be like a popular context, like Matchbox 20 is a great example where you don't need to be any sort of musician to appreciate it. Now, you don't necessarily need to for like prog music and that kind of stuff, but like the casual listener isn't going to get thrown off by anything. There's nothing that's so unexpected it's going to make them feel uncomfortable, which is one of the things that prog typically does. Like if you're coming from a listening style that's a little bit more on the basic, and you run something where all of a sudden every once in a while they throw in a bar of 17, 16, you're like, what the fuck just happened? It's just like, it feels like the floor just kind of fell out from underneath me, and it makes people uncomfortable. So this kind of messes with our brains in ways that makes people feel uncomfortable. And when you're a musician and you feel some sort of way about your level of play, when you're confronted with this, even if you're seeing a band that you like, there is that sort of level of just like, oh, what are they doing? That's crazy. I don't understand it. Or like, there'll be some sort of, I don't know the right words for it, but you'll feel some sort of way about it. And a lot of people turn that into like, I mean, we see musicians that go see other musicians and they're in the back of the place like this, right?
Yep.
It's a musician thing, but it's also, I mean, it's one of the things that they even talk about in Effortless Mastery as like almost like a neurotic musician thing, like something that's to be gotten over,
The sense of judgment, the sense of analyzation. I always feel like the bartender at every club that I play, I'm like, that guy is a world-class drummer probably. He's leaned up against the bar with his arms crossed. I bet you he's one of the best drummers in the world, and I'm all kind of nervous now. And meanwhile, he's not. He just does people's taxes in his part-time.
That's funny.
Oh, man. Do you find, as a quick aside, with that style of music, Your kit certainly changes more often than not. Kit design. You're sitting in front of a lot of gear, and I'm going to quickly segue into your collection of gear. But like, and you're constantly on your Instagram. You've been like, you got different variations of kits that you use when you get new gear. When you, oh my goodness, like it's super stoked. I'm super stoked every time you upload something because here, I'm going to pull it up here really quick because you are always doing some type of variation of your kit that is super inspiring. Here, I'll do this.
I feel like I've just got kind of like gear ADD. Like for me, I don't like doing the same thing all the time. Like there's things that stay pretty static on my kit. Yeah, that's basically what I'm sitting in front of right now.
Okay.
But like, I don't know. I like things to be different. One of the things that I found inspiring early on was when I changed up my setup. Like if you look here on that kit, the rack toms are backwards, floor toms and everything else is kind of normal. It's got 13, 10, 8, 15, 18, which you'd think would be super messy and just like weird. But let's say you play something that you're used to playing on a normally set up kit. Like if I just reversed these two toms, it would be a straight up normal kit. It'd be like 8, 10. It would just descend in pitches. Mm-hmm. If I play something that I practice on that kit the exact same way on this kit, I don't have to do anything different, but it comes out differently. And I really enjoy that. I like when I play something and it kind of surprises me a little bit. And constantly messing my kit gives me that. Like it's just almost a really just like lazy way of coming up with something new. I mean, that's kind of probably a bad way to say it, but like
no, not at all.
It is fun to change it up. I find I get bored real quick. Not like real quick, but like I mean, this isn't going to last. Like I'm doing a series for Drumeo right now called Rhythm in Prague. And when that's done, there's no way I keep it the same. Not from any sense of like, I don't like it set up like this, but I know by the time like 6 months is done and I've recorded and released all that stuff, I'm just going to be like, I want to try something else, you know?
Yeah.
Are you constantly on the hunt for different inspiration? Like, would you give that advice is that the moment you get comfortable with something, change up your kit, change her up?
Well, I mean, there's positives and minuses to it. There's like, I mean, here's the thing. There's definitely positives to keeping it the same and getting so hyper comfortable with it that it just feels like home for you and you can just close your eyes and do whatever you want and then it's just going to come out awesome. Good. But there's some people that just like I described, just enjoys it when things surprise me. So I want to change it up just out of like, oh, that was cool how this came out this way. Like I had never set up my rack toms backwards until maybe 4 weeks ago or whenever I posted that picture. And when I sat down and played it for the first time, I'd even looked at it. I was like, this looks dumb and I don't think I'm going to like it. But then I sat down and I tried it. I was like, oh shit, I love this. It's kind of like the same way I came up with my favorite stack, which has basically drum kit immunity. This thing has been on my drum kit no matter what the setup is since I got him. Like whenever I signed on to the Sabian artist roster, I don't remember the year. This is a while ago now. But this was one of the first stacks I put together. And it's the best stack I've ever played. But it was also an idea that I thought wouldn't work. I was like, okay, I'm going to take a 17-inch really thin china with a bunch of holes, and I'm going to take a bottom hi-hat and put it on top. This is probably going to sound stupid, but let's see what happens. I love it. It's awesome. It's like you can get articulation like it's a hi-hat, and you can also get this real dirty, just like, kind of like, everything about this stack is just what I've always wanted in a stack. I couldn't believe it came out of something that I literally thought was not going to work.
Totally. Do you find that you are always identifying your sound? Like you're always on the hunt for your tone, I guess. We can identify drummers all the time just from like the first one that came to mind was like Jeremy Taggart from Our Lady Peace. Like that's ring snare. I'm like, if all I heard was that snare, I'm like, oh, that's Naveed. Cool. I know that song inside out. Like there's sounds that are notorious with drummers.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have that or that you're on the hunt for it, or does it matter? I guess. I
have a couple ways to answer this. There are aspects of my kit that I have that with. In fact, these toms, I rarely change these toms out because I just love how they sound. This is my Beach Heavy Sonar SQ2 kit. These toms are actually why I tattooed the mallet logo on the back of my neck. They sounded just like I couldn't. Yeah, I couldn't believe what
these good sounding like tom.
First turned them up, right?
That's right.
I mean, they may not be the toms for everybody, but when I hear them, I couldn't imagine wanting my toms to sound differently, which I almost feel bad saying because I've got like 7 amazing kits that all have different sounding toms. They all sound great, but it's just like these ones, there's something that's just magic about it. But for everything else, for like cymbals, and especially snare drums, as you can probably see from the wall back here, it's not so much like I have a particular sound that I go for. I actually appreciate the nuances and differences that I find in other gear. And one of the problems with being a bit of a gear addict is like every time that I get something like a new Sonar snare drum or like the VK Tempest thing that weighs like 40 friggin' pounds, like it's just like, oh my gosh, this sounds so great. And you maybe don't want to play it all the time, but when you put it back on the kit, you're just like, right, I love this thing. That's one of my favorite things about having so many of these. It's like I only keep my favorites. So when I swap something on I haven't played in a while, it's just like, shit, I forgot how dope the snare drum sounds. And it's just, again, it's kind of exciting how things just kind of come out differently without me having to really do anything different. That's what I like. But then you have my toms, and it's like, shit, I don't really want to change these out for anything. Even though I've got 7 amazing tom sets, I want to, these are as close to my sound, probably this stack, as I've got with anything.
Cool. You're the definition of an actual drum geek, by the way.
Yeah,
but also, Sean is about to have his second kid, and he'll understand with everything you're saying that even if you have a whole bunch of things, you have a favorite. You have a favorite, right?
Are we going to take this into the kid territory with that? That seems like dangerous territory.
I was like,
everybody's got a favorite child. Everybody has a favorite child.
I dislike mine equally.
Oh, perfect. Great. Yeah, everybody likes it equally.
Actually, but this does lead me to a question, Aaron. I'd be curious to know, and maybe this is too deep of a rabbit hole, but if for your kit, especially your kit, if you've broken into the hybrid and electronic hybrid, maybe even blending some of the sounds, how deep do you think that rabbit hole could get for you? Especially, I know what you're talking about. As soon as you swap a tom out, like if you don't put that big 14 there and you put a 10 there and you play like, something as simple as Even Come Together, and it's just like, whoa, that's a different song now. How deep could the electronic hybrid rabbit hole go for you?
Well, here's the thing. Basically infinitely. And that's actually like kind of the nature of how Paul's and my relationship started. Like we started hanging out when I was doing clinics for Roland, right? Where we were starting with like just the electronic kit, and then I was blending it into this kit. In fact, the only reason that I haven't typically had electronic stuff on my studio kit is I don't have a great way to monitor it in here. Like in the sense that when I hit something, I really hear it in the room. If I had like speaker sets in here, I would almost certainly be doing that a lot more. And I probably have been avoiding doing that for a reason, because it's like, I've got a ton of great Roland gear. I got a bunch of those mandala pads, and it's like, I know exactly how infinite that rabbit hole is. And there's so much cool shit that you can do. I've even got triggers that I really like in the sense of like augmenting sound, not like replacing a kick with the trigger. Like, that's cool. That's usable. But I like the idea of like, add something non-drum to it and use that as kind of like a new acoustically impossible sound. That's one of those things where it could go so infinite that I've just like not really dove down that rabbit hole a little bit on purpose.
That's when you want to have like a psychologist on staff or something like that.
Amazing. It's funny on the heels of that, you and I did some work together when I was at Roland, and one in particular was when we did that TD25 video. We did a TD25 for the TD25 launch, and we were in that Airbnb, if you remember correct. God,
I absolutely remember that place. It was an amazing place.
It was super, super nice. But the one thing that stuck with us, and whether you know this or not, it stuck with us for years afterwards, was that you took the kit and you designed it specific to you. The way you put the toms directly next to each other on the rack, like you had definitively looked at it and said that ergonomically, this is how I want to set this up. And it was super different than what, the way Roland would typically have it on the box or the way that you'd see it in any other videos. But I just remember you doing that, and then like Darren and I afterwards going, that is efficient, and that's how we're setting up our kits from now on. That's amazing.
That's actually amazing.
Super, right? And spoiler alert, anytime I was in any stores and setting up that kit, I would set it up generally like that. It kind of became a setup. Totally, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think that is a certain mind that I appreciate in you, is that the non-traditional nature of things, that
Yeah.
you're very okay with bending rules of how something is supposed to be used. Your stack, for example, is a great example, where you look at it, you analyze it, and you go, okay, what can I do with this that's different than how I'm supposed to use it? Do you
That's
challenge
exactly
yourself
it.
on that? Do you really appreciate doing that?
It's not something that I actively go for, but I will say this. I find music and, I mean, even gear by extension, to be something that's playful. Like, to me, setting something up how it would typically be set up rarely even crosses my mind. What I think about when I set something up is like, honestly, what would be fun? And
Yeah.
I try to not think about oh, it's supposed to be like this, doesn't cross my mind. It's more like, oh, what would be cool? Or I'm doing a particular just random thing I'm working on. Maybe we need to have these weird, stupid bells with spikes on them up there. Like,
Yep.
I don't know. I try and just like amuse myself and keep it fun for myself. And by just that being the way I operate, I guess I kind of come up with ways of doing things that are maybe a little bit unique to me, you know?
Yeah. Do you find you get a bit of a spotlight on you from manufacturers because you're using it a little bit differently? Is it a good, and I don't want to blow a marketing angle here that you may have already been put in place, but when you're using something the way that it's not traditionally meant to be used, you get put on the spotlight faster than anybody else, and hence your content kind of gets pushed forward a little bit further. Is that a good technique to maybe advise other people to do?
That's an interesting question. Now, I don't necessarily know if that would be like just like a blanketly positive statement. Like sometimes the weird for the sake of weird maybe doesn't necessarily work. But I feel like when you do it from, I guess, that intention of just like, how can I have fun with this and I don't care how it's supposed to be used, there's something real genuine about how you would be playing that instrument versus, oh, I'm just trying to do something weird. Let's see how's the weirdest thing that I could possibly do with this. There's
Right.
value to that, but I feel like the genuineness of what comes out of it might be lacking. Might not be the right word, but it's going to be coming from a different place. I think it coming from that place is why it kind of works for me.
I love that. Yeah.
I wonder too, Aaron. When I've seen, for example, I watched Bozio one time, and then Mangini, and they both made a reference to some of the ways that they had set their kit up was specifically just the sake of the least amount of movement they would have to make. Especially Mangini on his Dream Theater gig, he was like, I got to make this so ergonomically, like, just easy on myself because you can't be flailing. How much of that comes into your decisions, especially when you're setting up new kits?
Probably a lot. I like definitely for like angles and stuff and sort of where things are positioned. Like it's not something that's ever in like the forefront of my mind, but it's more like, okay, I need a bigger tom sound over here.
Gotcha.
I'm gonna adjust it to what I think would be the most kind of comfortable, and efficient's a great word for it, like efficient way to kind of like get around with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Efficiency, economy of motion is always the deal.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
Especially to me, like I haven't played a ton of prog, and anything I've played has been not that proggy, but I look at guys like yourself or say Bozio and Mangini, and it's just like there's just this level of musicianship and even just physicality, in my opinion. I know at PASIC in 2012, Mangini was playing like a sort of like rototoms across the front, and I mean he was rolling like, and it was just like, and the guy's he's a really short dude and he's not a very big man, and I'm just like, I'm I'm in good shape. I box. I'm 230 ish, and I think I'm in good shape. And I mean, that guy, I'd be scared to run a marathon against him. Like, he's in great shape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
There's something
totally. A lot of this kind of stuff, and like especially as you get into the more extreme metal, like it's I don't want to say it's not musical, but I will say it's almost, these words are just going to come out wrong, and I apologize to anyone who takes them the wrong way, but they're almost more athletic than they are musical. Meanwhile, they'll sound musical and be awesome, but like there is such an athletic component to being able to execute it. That's what I was trying to say.
No, I hear you. As a matter of fact,
it's a huge
Yeah.
part
like
of it, you know?
Jay Weinberg is in incredible shape, and he's also an amazing musician. Like,
yeah. Thomas
You have
Lang
to
talked
be.
about that as well, is the athleticism of
You have to be.
drumming. Yeah.
You have to be.
Yeah.
I've told the story many a time, so I'll abridge it, but I played in a band, and the guitarist told me that I look like a stenographer when I drum. I don't know if anybody knows what a stenographer is.
Yeah, it's the person that like writes the notes during like a court trial or whatever.
Court trial. I look like I'm a stenographer when I drum, because I'm just small motions. Everything's super small. I'm not doing anything overly dramatic. Toms are low. Everything economy of motion things. I'm not going to overwork. I'm not going to. And he urged me, and Sean, you've heard this. He urged me to look up air drumming, and when you start getting big, that's what the audience wants. The audience wants that type of showmanship. They want to be able to connect. You want to be able to connect with the back of the room, as opposed to like, is that drummer even moving? I don't even think that he's moving at all. That's obviously backing track drums, but being able to move and put the cymbals up higher. What is your balance between economy of motion and showmanship?
That's a great question, because like on one hand of things, I'm really inspired by guys like Questlove, where like if you see him playing something like You Got Me, which is like just like a real tight kind of 16th notey kind of groove, dude barely looks like he's moving. Like he's sitting there like this, his arms are just here, relaxed at his sides, and it's just barely looks like he's doing a damn thing. But also when you see him play live, like he really gets into it. He'll slam and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
There's aspects to sort of both of these things. Like economy of motion is important. Especially if you want to get like really blazing technique, like it's necessary in that pursuit. But like you said, like people want to see a show. It's less fun when people are just kind of sitting there in the zone. But there's not really a right or wrong way to do it, you know? Like the more technical your band is, the less room there is for showmanship. I'm not saying you can't do it. There's lots of people that do, but like the more involved you got to actually do stuff, the less this is sort of possible. But you know, you pick your moments. Like there's choruses typically will be a little bit more straightforward. This is a super gross generalization, but like you'll maybe want to slam a little bit more in those sections and like show the audience that you're into it, even if when you get into the really skittery part, you're, you know, business.
Yeah. Wow, that's a really good way of saying it. As a matter of fact, you're right. I guess in the end, you got to kind of know the rules before you can break the rules, right? So
that's a great quote.
Yeah. So I guess you got to be able to play like a stenographer before you can play like, I don't know, Bon Jovi. I don't know. Okay.
The guy from Dragon Force.
For Dragon, like stick tricks and just doing craziness. But before we go too far here, Greg asked a good question here. What's your opinion on the Sonar Chrome Pharaoh snare from the 70s? Personally, it's the best snare I've ever owned. You got one?
Yeah, I got 4 of those things. I love those drums. Yeah.
Well, go grab one, pull it out. Let's see it. I don't know what we're talking about here. Do you need a card catalog for your library of snares? Jeez.
Actually, I got a close one right here. This is a 14 by 6.5 one of those.
Yes.
Yeah. These things, the ferromanganese steel, there's something real special about that material. Like there's something in the coating that made it so it was like not particularly environmentally friendly. So they stopped making those drums. But I find that like it's a steel drum, but it's got like a real healthy hint of aluminum in there. And if you've played an aluminum drum, they're dry, they're poppy, they're almost a little bit woody for a metal drum. So you get this real sweet pop with like the aggression and projection that a steel drum has. It's a really excellent sound. That particular drum, I found it along a McQuaid for super cheap. Somebody had traded it in. And yeah, I've stumbled across a couple of those. Like that's a 6.5 by 14. I got a 5 3/4 by 14 above it, but I've also got the same shell in 14 by 4 1/4 in the designer series. And I've also got the Hulkin 80s 14 by 8 with 12 lugs and the hella hoops and the ridiculous like parallel throw off and stuff. Those ferromanganese drums, they are something special. Anybody that's listening, if you don't have one of those and you're able to find one for reasonable, again, these sort of phonic looking ones, they're typically not super expensive. The designer and signature ones, you're looking at like easily over $1,000 a piece, but you can't go wrong. They sound unbelievable.
So it's a good purchase Greg has. Good choice he's got going on.
Absolutely. The dude saying that's the best drum he's ever played, I believe it, man. That thing is killer.
Well, Greg, if you're looking to get rid of it, Aaron will buy it from you because add to his collection more than likely. But you can add a
one of the
couple
sizes
bucks
I
to
don't
it.
have. 100%. Yeah, hit me up.
That's
And
awesome.
if you're making suggestions, Aaron, for guys that are looking for that snare, what is your head choice for those any of them actually?
Ooh, that's tough. On that drum, actually, the one that I've got here, what do I have? Looks like I've actually changed that recently. That's a Power Center reverse dot, which isn't normally one of my go-to heads, but I think it's the head that actually was on it when I got it. And
Okay.
I'm actually a big fan of like when you buy a used drum to not immediately change the heads unless they're like super wrecked.
Right. Yeah.
But I find a lot of the time there's like some mojo in there. Even if it doesn't necessarily sound good by a traditional standard, you're gonna kind of get like a hint of what somebody else loved about that drum. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I always find there's something kind of special in there, and I kind of like
Yeah.
usually let the drum live like that for a while. And sometimes it just takes on that character, and that becomes how I love that drum too. So,
Cool.
I do not have heads that I'm like, I use this head on everything. It's no, kind of like my million flavors of snare drums. I change it up. In fact, I've got an HD dry on this this Tempest that I got sitting in front of me. I've literally never tried that head on another drum, but it sounds awesome on this thing.
Yeah.
I like to try and random shit. Like I said, if something surprises me, usually that's something I enjoy.
Yeah. For sure.
How much of it? I'm so glad you're mentioning this. How much of? Sorry, there's so much to digest there because you said some really cool things about getting a used snare and hearing why somebody did love it. That's awesome. That's really cool. And then secondary to that, at what point and what is your process in putting on new heads? Do you get inspired by putting on a specific head because you're like, this might be a good idea, and then do you just beer, snare, hockey game, just start playing with different things? What is your approach to figuring out what is the best solution for that snare for the tone that you imagine it having? And then when do you pull your chute and go, nah, that's not at all the way it's going to work, so start over?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, typically I will start, like if I'm changing a drum head and I don't want to put on the thing that was on it before, I'll typically go with an Evans G1. That's one of my kind of just sort of go-tos as like, I like to start with that head because you really get a feel for what the drum actually sounds like. I like the G1 in the same way that I like a Remo Ambassador, except on the G1, there's a slightly drier middle point. So I find it sounds a little bit better for kind of like how I typically like things, but I get a real clear idea of what that drum is. Now, the second part of that question, it does not take me long to tune up a drum because I've got a bazillion drums in this place. I've tuned up drums tens of thousands of times, maybe even 100,000 times at this point in my life. I can very quickly get a drum to sound good, usually without even tapping a lug, because I tune with 2 keys. You can tension it up by feel. And honestly, when I do that, it's almost always banging immediately. So typically I'll throw on a head within less than 5 minutes. I got it sounding awesome. Even if it's not necessarily what I'm going for, I can just like swap on another head. I've got several hundred heads in the other room. I can just pop on whatever I feel like. But that just comes from years of having way too many drums and just like drumming being the only thing that I've done forever. It's just, you get a feel for it. You can kind of like intuitively know what you're going to want in this drum before you even really try it. And like I said, you can tune it up by feel after having done it tens of thousands of times, and know that it's like, typically it's just going to sound great right away. Now, this doesn't work if you've got drums that are damaged in some sense. Like if you've got like a bearing edge that's a little out or it's a little out of round, those tricks aren't going to work. But if you're dealing with high-end gear, if you're dealing with, again, like stuff out of the German Sonar factory and stuff, like it's just going to work. If you know how to tune it up by feel, it's going to sound great the first time you try it.
You've heard just about every combination at some point. You're like, okay, aluminum snare. I know through my years of playing that this type of head combination is going to give me generally this type of idea. So let me give it a try. Sure. That's awesome. There's obviously been times where you put it up and you're just like, nope, next. Onto the next.
Yeah, there's definitely some combinations that I find like, just like haven't worked for me. But again, that's part of that learning process of like getting to a place where you've got an intuitive sense of like what's going to sound at the very least passable. Like sometimes you'll throw some heads on something and it's maybe not going to be your favorite thing. But again, I'm that kind of weird guy that like, even if it's not something that I like, if I can make it sound good, like if I tune it well and it's doing a thing that a tom does, but it's not necessarily my thing, I can appreciate that as it being something different. And usually if I don't like something, I actually try to stick with it for a little bit. Again, if I know all the variables are correct, like it's tuned well, there's no weird sounds. It's not like I've just tuned it like shit. It's just, this is a sound I'm not used to. I'll jam on that shit for a while. Cause sometimes you're going to find that like, after a couple of weeks of playing that set of toms or whatever it is you're messing with, you can find something that you like about it. Like there's even been a couple of used drums that I picked up that are still in my collection. I maybe won't name which ones, but there was one like fairly iconic drum that I grabbed that at first I was almost a little upset that I didn't like it. I was like, why don't I like this thing? I just spent like $1,500 on it. It's something I've wanted forever for whatever reason. And I'm not digging it. Yeah. But it was just because that drum had a personality I wasn't used to. The more I played it, the more I was like, oh shit, you're actually pretty dope. I was just kind of expecting something else that this wasn't bringing to the table, nor should it have. It's its own thing. I just didn't know what that was through ignorance at the point,
Brilliant. Yeah. How do you fall in love with the tuning? I'll use an analogy as I do. A lot of IndyCar and NASCAR racers, they don't know what the hell's under the hood. They just know how to drive the car, right? Yeah. And I find that musicians, and I'm generalizing here because there are a lot of guitarists which I interact with who've been playing for years and don't know how to set up their guitar or don't know how to do a fret job or don't know how to change their strings or intonation. Like they're struggled with that. And I find with drummers, it's almost, dare I say, worse, that we can play the hell out of drums, but we just don't spend time learning how to create our sound or have the patience to tune a drum at all. How do you fall in love with that? How do you approach that?
Well, I almost dislike that I'm going to use the same words I just used. Part of it is through just sheer experience of having to do it a bunch of times. Like if you buy an obsessive amount of drums, like I clearly do, if I didn't just grit my teeth through learning how to tune them, I'd have a bunch of really cool drums that all sound like shit.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. So
that happens more often than not.
Yeah. So I found, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not throwing shade at the people that don't put the time into this, but for myself, as somebody that's like spent most of his life just drumming, it's like, you get a drum, you want to hear how it sounds good. Like you buy a quality thing. There's no reason it shouldn't sound good, but I can't make it sound good. That kind of shit just pisses me off. So I would just sit there and figure it out. It's like, okay, why does this not sound good? Oh, maybe I'm not getting that head to actually sit super in tune. Okay, how can I solve that? And you try and figure out, like, how can I do this better? Next thing you know, you spend several hours on it, but by the end of it, you're like, okay, I've actually got this to a place that it works. Now, I wasn't always at a place where I could, like, tune a drum up by feel and typically make it sound good, like, extremely quickly without even really tapping the head. That took a lot of time. That took a lot of failing and having like disappointing snare sounds. And I remember, actually, I think I've got a second part to this story. I remember playing at some random club in a cover band, and I was really just falling in love with the backbeat. And I wasn't really getting a snare drum sound that I loved. And it was one of those things where it's like, the more consistent I got with this, the more consistently I didn't like the sound that was in front of me. So it kind of became like the type of thing where I just had to get better at making a sound that I enjoyed. Otherwise, I was going to get annoyed every one of these backbeats that I was learning to play super consistently. And it just, I feel like I'm not telling the story particularly clearly, but I remember that as like a moment in my life where it became not something that I was necessarily like struggling with, even though I didn't find it easy at the time, but it was like I had a reason. Like there was a burning desire to enjoy my backbeats, and I had to figure out how to get them.
Yeah.
So, that took sitting in my practice room with, just tuning up a drum several times. Because let's face it, if you just do it once in a while, you buy a new set of heads, you tune up the drum, you maybe dick around with it for an hour, and you finally get it sounding good, and you're like, okay, cool. Now I'm going to just like throw lug locks on and hopefully forget about it. Well, you're going to have the same struggle next time you do it. So if you do that, you get it sounding good, and then the next day you just go back and you drum, you just detune it completely to nothing and try again from scratch. Can I get that again? Or even if I can't get that particular exact sound again, can I make this sound satisfying? Yeah. You just keep doing it. The more you do it, the more you like look for something that sounds inspiring to you within your tuning ability, you're going to start building the skills to, again, intuitively tune things how you like them.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And you were illustrating in that as you're playing, doing king, like you hear an overtone and you're like, I've got 3 sets of this. Like I've got like an hour's worth of Mustang Sally to go through here, and this one overtone is going to destroy my head. I need to know instantly, in between the next song, can I throw a key on and eliminate it right away, or can I, like, what's my efficiency on getting this sound right? Or I'm using a little bit heavier sticks, and all of a sudden that lug is becoming a little bit looser because I'm hitting it. I want to be able to adjust it and take ownership of my tone, which I'm a big fan of. With any instrument, I'm a big fan of ownership of your tone.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Right?
Well, you're the only constant in that, so.
True, exactly right. And I think you hit it on the head there. It literally, I guess, when you when you get home, loosen it, bring it back up. Loosen it, bring it back up. I was kind of alluding to it before, trying to fall in love with the process of tuning, but does that involve like just sitting tuning just spending a day tuning, just like you would do paradiddles for 5 hours? You're just tuning your drum for 5 hours. Like, does that feel like it's part of the process of learning drums, is learning to take ownership of your tone?
That's part of it. It's not it's not a mandatory part of it. Again, there's lots of drummers that just like, that's not in their tool set. That's not even in their interest set. They're like, I don't give a shit how it sounds good. They'll like take it to someone to tune for them.
Right.
Yep.
That's totally fine. There's lots of people that don't want to geek out on these kind of aspects. But if you do, I mean, it takes practice like anything else. In fact, this sort of brings another memory up to mind where, like, because I like drums, I like to buy drum kits in ways where I can kind of set up anything in a particular like shell type. Like, for example, this is my Beach Heavy SQ2 tom set, but this is only part of it. This is 5 drums, but I've still got 3 more of these things. So I've got 8 toms for this kit, plus a gong drum, and I think like 4 kicks or something. One of the things that's particularly challenging with tuning is to take a large tom set and make it sound like a family. To make it so you can tune all 8 of these toms, and every pairing, it doesn't matter which 2 you're hitting at the same time, sounds good together, like a chord, you know?
Yeah.
That's one of those things where it is challenging. There has definitely been days in my life where I have spent damn near all day trying to tune up a tom set. It takes you forever. By the end of it, you feel like you got it. You go back and play it the next day, like, I don't really got it. So you got to get back at it. It takes a while to get good at that. And sometimes you may even find like a head might be slightly out. So like you might have one drum that's giving you trouble. Like, it's tough. But like overcoming those challenges, the only way to do it is to sink in, to keep trying. It's like, okay, everything sounds great, except this 13 sounds like shit when I play it with these 2 drums. Well, that's not going to fly because I like playing flams all over the goddamn place. So then you got to figure out, okay, how am I going to compromise this? How can I make this 13 sound good? And maybe I have to literally retune everything else to match to that because it's sort of the odd man out. That can be frustrating if you've got the rest of them already sounding great. Like, you almost have to compromise, and you have to sort of learn how you can make it sound like a family. Otherwise, it's just going to sound gross with certain things that you do.
I love that. I brought this up here on the heels of that. Aaron obviously doesn't need tuning devices, but what is your opinion of somebody who does not have the skill that you've got in regards to it, wants to get into it, maybe understand the tuning process? Do the tools help you understand the process, or do you find the tools mitigate the process and just it just does the job for you?
I've got a couple of views on this. Now,
go for it.
This is coming from a place where I have never actually used those tools. So I may be saying this out of sheer ignorance. They may be different than how I'm describing it, but how I understand them is that they will pretty much ballpark it. Typically, those tuning tools are based off tension. Now, if you're using something where maybe your bearing edge is slightly out on one of your drums, kind of an extreme example, but like tension isn't going to make that drum sound good. Like tensioning it where like you've got it to a particular value that they got a different drum to. I want this drum to sound kind of like that. Let's try it. It's going to get you to a place where, you've got equal tension on your head, but that doesn't necessarily translate to it sounding good.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you can ballpark it with these tools, but you still need to use your ears to really get it to sound how you want. Now, again, this is provided you've got that level of geek in you where you really want to go after a sound that you find pleasing. A lot of people are just like totally cool with a drum just sounding like a drum. I mean, let's face it, I could detune this snare drum and it would still sound like a fucking snare drum, and it would probably sound good, especially after you put it through a studio and process it.
Yes.
It just would.
Yeah.
But it could maybe sound a little bit better if I took the time and actually used my ears and tried to make it sound good. For me, I always thought it was important to be able to hear it, to be able to actually like hit the drum and understand, okay, like, why don't I like these overtones and how can I change that? How does adjusting this lug affect all the rest of them, which can be super maddening when you're first learning this stuff, because it does. You turn one of these lugs and it's not like you're just affecting this sixth of the drum, you're affecting all of it in some ways. So it's, it can be real challenging. I understand why people want tools to help with this. But in the same way that, like, when I was growing up, I didn't have anybody showing me how to learn quintuplets or to even count them or feel them. You just have to get in there and fucking try and figure it out and learn how, like, okay, how does this sound? How does it feel? Okay, I feel like I'm playing the pattern right, but it's like, okay, maybe it sounds a little bit lopsided. I know something's wrong. I can diagnose that just as the player of like, okay, these aren't even. They're supposed to be even. Even though I don't know how it sounds, like, you can answer these questions yourself if you really just genuinely use your A, curiosity, B, your ears, and just be smart about it, you know? Not everybody wants to put that time in. I'm not throwing shade at anybody that doesn't want to put that time in. But like,
two things I think about on that is number one, if anybody had these tools, like the tension watch and that type of thing, if they had it and they were currently using it, then is there the advice you're giving is use it to get to what you sound good, but then start understanding the what's the word I'm looking for, the simplicities, like now start making the minor changes to it to customize the sound. Does that make sense? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way, like I said, to ballpark. You're going to be able to get things real close with those, and let's face it, more often than not, you're going to be able to get it passable just by using these tools. That's great, and that's more than good enough for most people. And if that's how you want to tune, that's awesome. For me, it actually just like legitimately doesn't work. Well, I mean, again, I haven't used these tools, so it's possible that it could. But I like tuning with two keys at the same time, so it's like,
the moment he uses it, he's like, these are the best things ever. I'm tuning all my drums with this thing now. It's amazing.
You never know.
I'm never using my ears ever again.
I'm never going to try, but yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of value in just like trying. Lots of people I feel like don't want to try. They want an easy solution. They want someone to just kind of hand them a thing that does the thing they're trying to get at. That's great. There's things that could kind of get you there, but you lose the artistry in that point where it's like we were talking earlier about sort of like finding your sound or whatever. Not necessarily like, I think, like there is an art to tuning. There's an art to getting a drum to sound a certain way. And yes, you can have a tool that'll help do that kind of thing. I take maybe a little bit of pride in the fact that I can just use my ears and how it feels in my fingers on the drum keys to make that happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think just on that, I always make it long here, but there are a lot of teachers, and we're going to get into your coaching, your Drumeo coaching, as a matter of fact, in a second here, is that there is there's a lot of teachers. It could be any instrument. It could be guitar. It could be, let's talk about guitar for a second, where the teachers teach you the fundamentals of how to play the instrument, how to hold the instrument, those type of things. And we talked about tone ownership again, and I'm really going to bring that back because I'm a big fan of that term. I've been using it for years, but tone ownership. Tonership is that there's the teacher's responsibility to teach you how to play the instrument, but it seems like there isn't a lot of responsibility for the teacher or inspiration for the teacher to teach you, we're going to learn about distortion this week. We're going to learn about delay this week. Bring in your favorite CD, and we're going to try to replicate the guitar tone that's happening. That's rare, and some of those teachers that I've met that do that, I think are amazing. They're teaching the entire stages like a Jedi, where like to become a Jedi, you need to not only learn the Force, but you also need to assemble your lightsaber. You need to go on the quest to find the kyber crystal. You need to go through the entire process to understand what it takes to be a Jedi, instead of just learning sword play. Cool, you can learn how to use a sword. Cool, you're a Jedi. No, it's so much deeper than that. And I always imagine that teachers have I don't want to say obligation, but I do feel like teachers are in a position where they can inspire you to not only play the instrument, but create tones and sounds and understand the entire fundamentals of what that instrument can do. I feel like you're the type of person that inspires people to do that within your lessons. Am I right?
Well, I'm glad that you feel that way, and I appreciate it. I think there are just different types of teachers. There's different types of approaches, and on top of that, there's multifaceted layers to mastering any instrument and how you can express yourself on it. The fundamentals, the building blocks, the theory in the sense of like learning how subdivisions work, learning how to actually like, play your rudiments and play, in different time signatures. Those are sort of like building blocks. They're part of the language of music, but they're not necessarily anything to do with the creativity of it. They're learning how to put something together with the actual pieces. But where I find I don't want to even put this on teachers. I think this is one of those things where like some people are maybe predisposed to wanting to explore things on their own. Like there are some people where the discovering something is what kind of drives them. I feel like I'm one of those people where finding something new or like learning how to do something different with it, or even just being like, okay, let's take this idea that I've been working on and see what happens when I fuck with this variable. And what does that do? What does it sound like? How does it feel? Yeah. That's a different type of practicing and learning that's maybe a little bit more difficult to articulate as a teacher or to like put into your lessons. On that's actually one of the things that I'm doing with the Drumeo coach series I'm doing this year, which is the rhythm and prog thing, where every month they've got a new lesson that's coming out on like a different sort of like, I keep using the words rhythmically adventurous in that, and I've used it here a little bit today too. So you learn kind of like a new tool as far as like rhythm theory is concerned, but it's not like, okay, today we're working on time signatures. Here's, quarter note meters, eighth note meters, and 16th note meters, and here's a couple examples of each, go learn them.
Yep.
I don't think like that's enough. And one of the things that I've found particularly challenging, especially in online lessons, is that most people seem to just want it handed to them, where they want like, I want you to just give me these examples and that's the thing that I'm going to work on. Yeah. What I'm specifically challenging people to do in the rhythm and prog thing is, here are the building blocks. Yes, you're going to get these examples of like, to use the things we were using before, a couple of different types of time signatures, but the homework is to create something new. Pick a top number that we didn't cover today, and I want you to write that down. I want you to like fill it with notes and just see what happens. Some of them are going to sound stupid. Some of them are just not going to be interesting. Some of them you may not even do it correctly. But I want them exploring using the tools that we've discussed that particular month. Because I think for myself, that's the most fun thing in music. I love discovering new things. That's why my book is so weird and just out there with crazy ideas. But like, if you can spark that interest in a student, that's when they can kind of like take their education by the horns, like take the reins of it, I guess I meant to say, where it's not just like I'm taking this stuff that the teacher assigned me. It's like, oh, now it's like, I want to know what's around that corner and I'm just going to go figure it out.
Yep.
Helping somebody find that curiosity, that like urge to discover something. It's hard to convey, but I think it's one of those things that is maybe a little bit lacking in the digital generation. That maybe sounded a little harsh, but again, we're so used to having everything just fed to us. It's hard to motivate yourself to try and find something yourself. And you learn so much more that way, because not only are you going to maybe learn something new, but you're going to fail a little bit on the way there. And that is a good thing. People get scared of failing, but failing gives you more clarity on what wrong is. I don't really like the word wrong, but like, you were attempting something, it didn't work. Why? This gives you a better idea of what right would be and how to play with these variables. Like we talked about right at the start of this conversation with the spirit of prog, where it's exploring things that are new and different and rhythmically adventurous. You're kind of playing with the rules of music and learning what fucking with it does. And from there, you can be more creative with things. And like, you'll get these ideas of like, oh shit, that didn't work, but it actually sounded pretty cool. Can I use that somehow? Like, if I can inspire someone to think like that, they're going to do more for their education than I could ever just give them in a video.
Absolutely, yeah.
Dude.
Yeah, because wrong is such a human construct too. Wrong is something that someone believes, but wrong to someone else might be exactly what you're looking for. Like,
I mean, here's the thing: music's a game that humans made up. There is no fucking
yeah,
wrong. You can play
exactly.
whatever you want. There are no rules.
Exactly.
There are some teachers that, and I'm trying not to be negative here, but I'm just kind of, for the sake of a touch point, there are teachers that are not motivated to motivate their students, right? So all the motivation, as you're expressing, needs to be on the side of the instructor, the teacher, the coach, the moderator, the person that's really inspiring to do more than just the lessons, right? More than just that.
Yeah, totally.
So how do you personally? I think we've probably been discussing it for a while, which is good. But some teachers need to be reminded on what inspires them to want to even be a teacher, right?
Yeah, well, that's one of those things to kind of just like think deeply about, you know, like
Right.
I mean, I brought up effortless mastery earlier. I mean, there's like a lot of like, there's even teaching dysfunctions. There's people that teach for not necessarily a genuine reason. So some people don't necessarily want to do it the right way. The right way is a wrong way to say it, but like, kind of like I was talking about with like learning how to tune yourself, like learning how to do these kind of things. Like this maybe isn't for everybody. Like not everybody wants to go and explore shit. Like there's some people out there that just want to play like AC/DC drums and that's like fulfilling for them. That's awesome. I'm not one of those people, but there's like a subset of people that want to be creative and want to sort of like push the art form forward. These people require that type of inspiration. And like, it's not even necessarily just on the teacher. Like it's a two-way street. As a teacher, you can help show somebody that this exists and discovery is fun. But I mean, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink is a real thing. You know, some people maybe just don't want that. You know, like I said, it's not for everybody.
Yeah. And there's a ton of master teachers like David Jones out of Australia and I know even Benny Greb probably, I think I've heard he does this, like he auditions students. So does David. Like you've got to be willing to go down the path with them because even, I mean, and you know, as I taught for a little while and one of the things that I always saw is the clearest way to having a good relationship with that student is establishing what they needed and just how can I facilitate them learning that other than me trying to ram some sort of book that was, you know, written for someone else down their throat. Good example is my student Derek, who had, I mean, he just was obsessed with double kick. And no matter how I tried to lead him to groove, it was just not working. And I finally realized, look, that's not his path. He wants to do it. Let's find a way for him to do that. And I just grabbed accents and rebounds and I said, look, go through this book and put a click on. And I mean, he came back the next week, like fucking, he was like on cloud 9. And that was me. I was impeding his path. I was concerned he wasn't going to have the big fat bottom groove. He didn't give a shit about that. Right. So it's like, get out of the way and facilitate what the student needs.
Their expectations.
Yeah, that's super important.
Yeah.
When does complacency kick in as a drummer? Or as a teacher, where you realize, well, this is as much as they need. This is as much as I'm willing to give. This is sure, and you do have to find that little angle where you're like, okay, well, I need to find that, and we're being really existential here within this conversation. But like, how do you find that inspiration to be like, we've plateaued a bit here. I need to kick this student in the butt, and okay, this is it. We're learning this week, and I'm going to inspire the hell out of them to practice that extra half an hour a week, right?
See, that's interesting because I feel like a lot of that has to still come from the student, you know?
Hello
like,
from Guam, by the way, Jared. Hey, Jared. From Guam. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Like I feel like a lot of that still has to come from the student. Like if you're in a situation where you're teaching somebody and they're like not really giving you their best efforts, part of that could be that they're not interested in the material that you're teaching them. So that's got to be a bit of a conversation of just like, kind of like Sean was saying a little bit ago of like, what do you want? Like, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
And if you go down that path with them and they're still not giving you anything, that's an indication that it might just not be the right relationship. Like there's
Yep.
totally situations where like a student teacher relationship just doesn't work.
Yep.
People are people. There are personality clashes. There are times where it's just not the right fit, whether
Yep.
you've got the best intentions, whether they've got the best intentions. That to me, that's the only place where I find kind of like complacency can come in. Like, yeah, if the student doesn't really want to apply themselves, but at that point, it's like, I mean, what could you have done for them anyway?
Yeah. And they're applying that to their life anyways, not even outside of that rehearsal space. Yeah.
Some people
So-
just like get into drums because they think it's going to be fun, and like, you know, maybe it's not for them. I've had lots of students where it just like wasn't quite their thing. Eventually they kind of stopped playing, or, you know, maybe they kind of find their thing that's like outside of what we were trying to do. It happens, you know, we're people. Sometimes we don't do the right thing, you know?
So true. And in regards to Drumeo, especially with coaches, you're not necessarily face to face with students. So so how do you design your curriculum to be, I don't want to say neutral, but like you have what you want to achieve to a certain level, and like how do you approach your curriculum for Drumeo? Yeah.
Well, I mean, here's the thing with Drumeo. One thing that we've found from just doing this for so long, I've been with Drumeo for, I think it's been over 10 years at this point. And when we started, we were doing kind of the rhythm freak stuff that I've been doing with like MD and like on my YouTube channel and stuff. And that just wasn't for most of the students. There were certainly some of the students that just totally loved it. But what we found works on Drumeo is we got to kind of like give them a taste of something. So like, for example, the next lesson that's coming out in rhythm and I shouldn't say the next lesson because the first one hasn't even dropped yet. That comes out on Thursday.
Wow.
The one
You heard
that's
it
going
here.
to be next month is
Yep.
the one that's going to be next month is getting into time signatures, and that may be slow for some of the advanced students. It may be really challenging for some of the more beginner students, but I try to teach it in such a way where, again, I'll give them some examples that give them the building blocks of these tools. Some of them will be easy enough that anybody can just sort of like at least grit their teeth through it and kind of get it started. But where it's going to be a little bit more open-ended is, again, assigning homework of using these variables to create something. And in that, you can do anything that you want. So if you're at a level where this is like, even just reading this stuff is challenging, you may be like, okay, I'm going to try a different time signature. I'm just going to just take one of these and like add a note. That could be more than good enough. But some of the more advanced students are going to maybe try something like that, and they're going to be like, cool. But what happens if I mess around with stuff? I'll give them options. I'll give them ideas of like things that you can do within it. Where you take that is partly dependent on where you are in your drumming journey. And also dependent on your actual interest in the topic. So you literally can't make something for everybody. You can try your best, but it's just simply not possible. So with each of these, again, I try and just give them initial building blocks and assignments based on using their creativity with them, which can blossom however it makes sense for that student.
But also the celebration that even the simplest of things need to be revisited on a fairly regular basis.
100%. I mean, like, if you don't have the fundamentals of stuff down, like, I mean, how can you play with these rules that I said earlier kind of aren't really rules in the first place, you know?
Yeah.
Correct. Let's go to a question here. Greg asks a very valuable question. A very valuable, and I don't mean that facetiously. This is one of my most important things when I talk to drummers is your seat height. As you know, I sat in my car on a regular basis, driving all around BC as a rep. This seat in my car was the most important thing. How did it feel? Because I'm going to be sitting in it for 8 hours a day going between music stores. This is the most important thing. How do you feel about the importance of your seat height, or have I buried the lead?
I feel like it is fairly important, and it's one of those things that may adjust with you. Like, I've been playing with my seat at basically the same height for probably more than 20 years. But let's face it, I'm not getting any younger. I'm getting into my 40s this year. And like, you know, your body kind of changes a little bit. You may be like, I know it's not like old or anything, but it's like a hell of a lot different than being like 15. So like, you know, you change your setup.
By the way, if you're getting into your 40s, it's all downhill. All downhill, dude. Every bone starts hurting.
I'm sure.
Everything. Yeah, it's all downhill. No, go.
But my concept for seat height, and I'm in no way trying to say this is like the only way to do it or like the right way. This is what works for me.
Sure.
I like to have my thighs angled slightly down at the knee. So if this is my butt, when I'm sitting just kind of naturally, my leg is maybe on about this angle, and the top of my stroke when I'm really cranking the bass drum still isn't quite horizontal. Now, I like to sit with really good posture, and I keep my snares fairly flat in a way where if I relax my shoulders, bring my elbow up at 90 degrees, where the stick is just right in the middle of the snare drum. Now, how is this important? Couple of things. One, this sits you up high enough that it's actually easier to set up deep toms over kits. As a guy that has like way too many fucking drums, that's actually somehow important. But more important than that is when you're playing something double bass wise, one of the things that I see with people a lot is collisions between their hand and their leg. So, you know, you're playing something, your left leg's coming up, your left hand is going down. All of a sudden you punched yourself instead of getting the backbeat. That sucks. If you sit up this way, that's physically impossible because the top of your leg stroke is significantly below where your hand is going to hit a backbeat on the snare drum. There's about this much clearance between those two parts of my body at the closest they will ever be while I'm playing. That's why I started setting up this way. And yes, I came to this conclusion by thinking it through like that. What makes the most sense to me? And when I sat there, I tried it out. I was like, okay, this actually feels comfortable. It's probably weird at first. Nobody likes sitting that high normally. You see the vast majority of drummers sit pretty low. So it was an adjustment. But as I got used to it, it worked for me. I got comfortable with it. That's kind of the same with any technique. There's no right, well, I shouldn't say there's no right or wrong technique. There's better techniques than others. There's ones that are more thought out than others. But at the end of the day, you got to pick one, practice with it, and build facility. The people that like constantly change things up, it's like, I spent 2 weeks on this and I still suck. Well, no, it's because you only spent 2 weeks on something you should have spent like 10 years on. So I just stuck with it because it made sense and it started to work for me.
Yeah. I had a throne and it wouldn't go low enough. Like because I would sit super low and that was just the way I sat. And then the more I played like that for like 12 years, I was like, my ankles started hurting after a while. And I was like, I don't know, I'm walking different. I got different shoes. I'm getting older, son. Things are starting to cramp up a bit. So the moment I cranked my seat up a tiny bit, not even a tiny bit, I was ridiculous for one rehearsal. I brought it up like, so I was sitting like, look at me, I'm on a throne. And instantly, like, everything flowed. And I was like, why wasn't I doing this forever? This feels so much better.
This kind of goes back to what we were talking earlier about ergonomics. Like, find a way that makes the most sense for your body to do so.
Yeah. So I spent some time, like, very much so, playing at different throne heights till I found this beautiful medium. And that's where I've been for the past, I want to say, like, at least 6 or 7 years at this great height that makes me feel good when I'm playing. I'm not exerting too much muscle in my legs, and I also don't look like. Look at me! I'm above the drum.
You don't look like a stenographer.
I don't. No, I still look like a stenographer. That goes without saying. But I don't. I'm king of the castle. I don't look. I don't look like I'm overseeing the entire band. So there is medium ground. Yeah.
Probably has a lot to do with body type. I mean, I remember taking lessons with Mitch and him talking about, like, you know, pretend you're a marionette. I want you to just your ass be on the throne. I don't want your legs to have anything to do with it. And conversely to that, talking to Weckel at the one Victoria Drum Fest he was at, he sort of blew all that out of the water. He likes sitting higher. He likes where his feet are sort of like feels like he has control almost over the footboard and not the marionette feel at all. He's a very, he's a pretty intense guy. And he plays intensely, but it works because of who he is and his body and the way that, and like you said, Aaron, he's stuck with one thing long enough that it just fucking works. The same as Bozio's technique looks awful, but the man has never suffered from carpal tunnel. So
everybody's body's different. You got to kind of find a thing that works for you.
Yeah,
I like to think about it as just finding, I mean, we said it before, but like finding something that feels like you're using your body efficiently to do a job. If I feel like I'm working too hard for something, I'm going to change it.
But that doesn't
and like
mean
you
that
said, building the facility over not 2 weeks, not a year, not 6 months. It's like, no, you've got to put in real time. Like,
Yeah.
I was going to say that doesn't mean that when I'm in the audience, I'm not judging that drummer. That guy's sitting really tall, really high up. Oh my God. Did you see that guy? He was sitting like really high up. He's a terrible drummer.
I knew a guy that sat on one milk crate and he played
Oh my
double kick.
God.
And he was really
How?
good.
Rikers Island.
Was he like
And he-
3.5 feet tall or?
No. And actually, and Darren was a really big dude. Like he was probably about 280 pounds soft. Like
That's
this is, he was a big boy. And and he played, but like he played Metallica. He played Ride the Lightning. He played the whole album.
That's amazing.
And I mean, he slayed people with his feet. And I just, like, we would just sit there and giggle because it's like, how are you even doing that? And then how is, like, I sat on his crate one time. I'm like, that's not even comfortable. Like,
totally.
It's like someone's punishing you by playing the drums that high.
It happens once.
Like a constant Charlie horse.
It happens once, and then I played a show, and I totally forgot my throne. And it was like a festival show just down in Richmond, and I totally forgot my throne, and I didn't have time to go get my throne, and so somebody just threw me like a metal fold out chair, like the fold chair. And I'm like, oh, I guess I'm sitting on this, and it was surprisingly comfortable. It was surprisingly like it was the kind of the right height, and everything was like, oh my goodness, this. Weirdly, I saw the photos afterwards because there was like pro photos, and it has me sitting on a fucking fold out chair, but it worked. It totally worked. But then in my head, I'm like, I can't just buy myself a fold out chair and use that for every gig. That's just what we call in the industry unprofessional. I need to get myself a nice roadster throne or something like that. Like, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. So
pro tip on that. I remember back in the day, I think there was only once I ever actually forgot something integral to a gig. And I went home and just was like, I need a solution to this. So what I did is I made just a list of everything that I needed at minimum for a gig. And no matter how sure I was of all my shit, even though I have a kit that just stays ready in cases, including hardware, on the inside lip of my hardware case, there's the bare minimum, like all the hardware that you would need, all the drums that you would need to just do like a basic 4-piece kit. And no matter how sure I am, I always check those things before I left the house. Never forgot
Great idea.
Including a rug, including even a fan. Like you can have some optionals in there. Like if you just put eyes on it before you leave the house, this problem is solved permanently.
Yeah. Great idea. Phenomenal idea. Especially when you're rushing home or you're just grabbing stuff or throwing it in the car, or you assume that things are in your gig bag ready to go. As you said, you could eyeball it.
I had to put eyes on it.
I used to have a teacher. He was a jazz teacher, and he would actually take the drums, whatever he was going to use the night of the gig, and he would throw it in the garage so that, because you're used to your drum room looking like you have lots of stuff, and oftentimes he would leave without something. But he said, if I put it in the garage and I loaded up, like there was no way of leaving something behind because the garage was empty of drums. There was nothing on the floor. So once the garage was empty, I'm good to go on the gig, which makes a ton of sense, especially if you got like 800 snares. You're not sure if you grabbed, the right snare.
Yep, to all that. And you guys know I play a very small drum kit for that reason. Yeah. If I can just bring snare, kick, and one floor tom, I'm a happy guy to any gig. So Aaron, you're hitting on the head there.
The stenographer.
Yeah, dude.
Well, I'm a stenographer, so it goes. Oh my God, is that going to be PJ stenographer Herman? Jared says
we need to get you like a little keyboard for your.
It's a small Korg or Yamaha or synth. It's a small synth, but people are like, "Is he in a court case right now?" This is really weird. Jared said something earlier on here. I always say sticking to drums require acceptance of certain things. Drums are expensive. Mm-hmm. You need work. You will need work and money, obviously, to be able to compensate for the expensive. Drums are loud. You'll need acceptance. Drums are big. You will need space. Mm-hmm. All of those things resonate heavily.
Unless you're PJ, you don't need a ton of space.
No, you don't get paid more to bring more, by the way. It's a little secret.
That's right.
No. If anything, you get paid less because it takes you more effort / more time, so your time is worth less for the exact same gig.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I heard a good quote a long time ago, and maybe you could reply to this, is the best kit is a kit you don't need to bring. So
Yeah.
we've certainly all played house gigs where we've got where we show up and we're like, oh, I guess we're playing this drum kit tonight. Or the person that always wants to supply the drum kit for the night is always the person that has the worst drum kit.
Yeah.
That always seems to
true.
be the thing, right? Yeah, nobody's going, oh, sure, yeah, just totally take my $10,000 drum kit. Everybody can play it tonight. It'll be great. Everybody's
no
like,
one's sharing their SQ2s for
nobody's bringing SQ2.
No.
Everybody's like, oh, I've got this export from '73 that's got the same drum heads on it. Oh, everybody can play that tonight. That's totally fine. But how do you feel about that? As you said, you have your essentials that you'll bring, but how would you approach showing up to a gig where there's a house kit sitting there that may not be of best quality?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on several factors. Like if I was playing something like a third ion gig, it just wouldn't fly. Like it would be the type of thing where like there's so much intricate stuff going on. It's got to be set up kind of ergonomically. Like as much as it's a pain in the balls, I'm taking a kit that I designed for that because I mean the stuff is just so hectic. I probably couldn't do a good job spontaneously on something else that almost certainly isn't set up in some kind of wacky way like I've been working on that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm just playing a normal gig, I mean, there's a gig that I used to do all the time here in Winnipeg. We almost did it for like a decade straight. Dr. Hot Bottom playing Soul Night at the Cavern. And
cool.
almost all the time, I would just use the kit that was there. And it sounded like balls. It was the most beat up thing. But I learned to have fun with it. Now, there were things that I would bring. I didn't like the hardware. I hated the seat. So as much as it was a pain, I'd bring my hardware so that I could set up cymbals comfortably. I had a seat that I felt good about. My hi-hat stat functioned properly. I'd bring my cymbals and snare drum, but I'd still use the kick and toms.
Yeah.
But I mean, they sounded really shitty compared to what I would have brought myself. So I mean, it's a compromise. Part of it is like sometimes you're just not going to dig it. Sometimes I wouldn't be in the mood and I'd bring a drum kit, even though there's a drum kit there. Yeah. But other times I would just have fun with it. It's like, okay, I understand this bass drum is not going to sound how I want it to sound. This floor tom is going to sound terrible. Well, actually, one of my tricks with that is I like to fuck with it. Like I would go in the back. There was always just broken crap hanging out in the back room. So I'd like see if I could find like a broken piece of a tambourine and just like tape it to the head. So I mean, it's going to sound bad. I'm just going to make it sound more dead. But now I've also got this other kind of neat thing that I can mess around with. I like fucking with weird stuff. I mean, you guys see what I do. Like,
you play a wrong note in jazz, you play it twice. Yeah, I know the routine.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, you can make the best of it. It's like, it's easier on you, especially if you're playing a gig that's not paying particularly well. It's just kind of you're doing it for fun with your friends. It's like, okay, I could bring a whole drum kit, or I could deal with this and fuck with it, make it just kind of silly. Make the musicians in the crowd be like, what the shit is he doing with that? It sounds weird but neat at the same time. I love that stuff. That's fun.
That's cool.
And we're all faced with that at some point, is the dreaded house kit, and how to deal with it. And for me, it's always just, that's why I play such a small kit. You know me, 16-inch bass drum guy, is that I don't feel bad about, like, it's easy for me just to throw the 16 in the back of the car. I have it.
Totally.
If I show up and the kit, if it's like a 26-inch bass drum, I'm just like, oh, no, sorry. Like,
this ain't going to work.
This is me. I'm like, that's 10 inches bigger than what I can tolerate an 18 or 20 or 22. I can make that happen. But if somebody's like supplying a drum kit and they're like, here's my 32-inch bass drum, by the way, I'm like, okay, well, you need to step
See me, I'd be just like, fuck yeah, something.
Of course you would, exactly.
Totally
and where I'd be like, oh, it's no big deal. I'll just take out the bass drum and throw mine in there. It's no big deal. It's totally good because it's of no consequence to me just to kind of throw it in place, which has happened more often than not. It's not me being picky. That's just because I play a 16-inch bass drum and I can just throw it on my hip as I'm going in the club. Cool.
Totally.
But typically the best kit is a kit you don't need to take. Jeez. 2 questions here. Let's do this one. Oh no, let's do this. Yoink.
That's a comment.
Yeah, it is. We were talking about it before you showed up. I've been to the factory. Have you been to the factory?
I have been to the factory.
Yeah.
In what year was that? I want to say 2016 at some point. It's actually funny. They had a new Ferry Bolt is the dude's name. And I forget what his position was specifically, but he found an essay that I'd written on my website which is currently down. But the essay was just why I play Sonar drums. And it was basically me gushing for about 1,500 words, how I fell in love with Sonar, why I was so obsessed with the sounds, and like my journey from getting my first kit into this kit where I tattooed it on my neck. It was after I tattooed it on my neck that I kind of wrote this thing out. And he was just like so floored by my passion for it that he arranged them flying me out to Germany for a factory tour. Like I'd already been an artist for quite a while, but I'd never actually been there.
Cool.
So it was actually pretty neat. They put me up for a couple of days in this hotel that was literally an old school with a very literal title. Literally, it was old school, but in German, which is Alte Schule, Altesschule. I think I might be spelling that totally wrong, but it was
You're
like
right,
the
actually.
coolest place. Sweet. Yeah, it was just a really fun experience. Like I was blown away by just how exquisitely handcrafted things were, like stuff that you'd think was a machine, like spraying on like a fade finish. I watched a motherfucker without any machines perfectly spray a kit in what felt like a couple of minutes. He was like hand turning it and using like literally just a spray can in his hand, obviously like hooked up to like an actual like pressurized thing, but like I couldn't believe how perfect it was turning out with what seemed like zero effort from this guy in like no time whatsoever. The factory was full of amazing surprises like that. And it's actually how I ended up getting my hands on this guy, which is the only basically HLD 590, but with full SQ2 hardware. I know Drum Center Portsmouth, I think it was. I'm totally messing up the name. There was a shop that had like an anniversary. They did 10 drums inspired from that drum, but they weren't quite the same. Mine's the only one that actually has like APS fittings, which is these thick rubber gaskets under the lugs. It's one of one. It's like literally the only one on the planet. And they made it for me to my specs. It's funny because I was walking through the back room. I saw the shell of this thing without any drilling, like no holes, like literally just a bare cast bronze heavy shell, 14x8. I saw it dead in my tracks. I was like, what the fuck is that doing there? You guys haven't made this drum in so long. This is one of those things that I've like wanted forever, but could never afford an HLD 590 because like even at the time they were going for like $7,000 US in okay condition.
Right.
Next thing I knew, they were telling me about how they were planning to put it together. I was like, oh, it'd be super cool if you did it this way. And just one day long from then, it was just like, I got to knock at my door. It was like, oh my God, it's this drum. Holy shit. They did it the way that I couldn't believe it. They didn't even tell me that they were going to do the hardware that way. And it was, again, it's the only one on the planet that's exactly like that from the factory. And it's, yeah, that's one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me. The factory tour, and that's just the cherry on top.
Wow. Yeah. And let's be clear, the staff is awesome as well. Everybody who works there, everybody who works for the company is pretty cool.
They're unbelievable.
This person seems to like stuff. This person named Scott Atkins says the HLD 590. Yes. Yeah. He's a big fan of that.
Hey, Scott.
He's a fan.
It's funny. I was talking before you showed up, Aaron, and there was I can't remember his name. He worked at Second Encore. I think might have been Dave. Yeah. Okay. So Dave, for anyone that's ever been,
he had like the really sort of poofy hair.
Yeah,
right? I don't remember his last name, but I absolutely remember Dave.
Poofy hair.
I think it was Dave. Yeah. So, and I've
PhD.
never.
I hope he's not listening and offended.
Yeah. He's not, yeah.
If he's got poofy hair, he's well aware he's got poofy hair. That's fine.
But he, if anyone,
people call me Baldy all the time. I'm used to it.
Rolled through Winnipeg on Portage Avenue, there was this great, the secondhand kind of newish shop. But Dave, to me, just knew, like, he knew everything there was to know about drums. Like, and some of the racks he would set up on the displays were just like crazy setups. But he sat and he, like, for half an hour we talked about why he liked Sonar drums the best. And I had I mentioned to Paul that I had originally back in the day when I was playing on the road, I just grabbed the Force 3007 because it was just out of the box, sounded great, and I wasn't worried about it getting, a little bit dinged up. But he kind of took me through tuning it, and he explained, like, with the way the lugs were designed and how they designed them, and the fact that, even though it was a Chinese factory, they had flown like engineers over to from Germany to China, and how, just even like the way that I think there was the 1007 series, their lug placement was like, I think, and he said there was a way to measure it, but he was like, it was far superior to, like, I don't know, something he was talking like the Pearl Masters series. He's like, it was literally machined far better. And he literally has changed, I don't know how many drum heads. Dave's like done a million, but
he's probably done it more than I have.
Yeah. He's
almost.
Dave, almost, yeah. But he it was very it's kind of not the only time I've heard that. And I mean I'm not an endorser. But of course I've used the product, and it's funny how you hear it a lot. Like there's a lot of things you hear that a lot about the Sonar product. Is it just the consistency through the brands, and even like through the student models, through the economical models, and then right up to I forget who it was. I think it was Jojo was using something when I was at one of his clinics, and it wasn't even the higher end. It was a tom he liked. It was like the Force series or something for it, sort of similar. Anyway, but yeah, what a great mark on a company to that be always the consistent. Even Dave from Winnipeg sat me down and explained, okay, these are good drums, and here's why.
Totally. We talked about it before, but the people were always good, and not just because of anybody who might be watching right now, but the relationships are really cool with Sonar. Yeah. And I was certainly honored to, and Scott, this person said right here, the Sonar Factory is every bit as epic as my beard.
Absolutely.
Well, it is getting a little unkempt.
Yeah, well,
I think is what
at least it's close,
Yeah, kind of. It's getting there. But I'm a big fan of the artists they work with, yourself included. They always seem to have the I don't want to say top tier, but the artists, like I think of Jojo in particular, or I think of yourself or Gavin Harrison. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Benny Greb, absolutely. Like the people that are the most, I don't want to say influential, but everybody who is in the eye of education is definitely a major factor, where they're not just notable people that manage to play really well, but they have great educational books. They've got great, they're part of education, whether it's Drumeo, like yourself. But education is kind of a huge angle of Sonar as well. And we know Yamaha's like that as well in particular. But yeah. Sonar has always stuck with me that way. Do you feel that? Do you feel like education is a big factor with them?
I agree. And I mean, that's part of how I got on the roster as well. Like, I mean, Scott Atkins, in fact, I think I was the 12th Canadian Sonar endorsee, and he kind of just took a chance on me back in the day. Similar kind of thing. Yeah. I had like actually, I wasn't even really doing the online stuff, but I was teaching a ton at Long and McQuaid. I think I had 60 students at the time. I was touring around with a couple of bands and stuff. And yeah, they've always just kind of, I feel like they really genuinely love music and pushing the art form forward as much as they love like making incredible gear and of course selling incredible gear, because I mean, how else would you be a business if you were not doing that, right?
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there, and for the record, Scott, we were already talking about this before you even showed up, so don't think you're special or anything. Jeez, this was already we were in the Sonar talk. Yeah, I was actually just on the site earlier on and just seeing, because I'll be honest, I've been out of the loop for the past while on all brands of drums in particular, but is there like what's new and what's kind of happening? Is there anything you can think of right now that's kind of jumped out as interesting that's happened?
Well, I think,
world?
The most recent one that I know of, and I've been like a little bit out of the loop as well, especially considering we're, in the middle of a pandemic and we haven't really, been to a NAMM show in a couple of years. But I remember the last thing that I saw Sonar drop that I was really excited about. I actually don't have one of these yet. Hint, hint, Scott. Just kidding. Was the Benny Greb brass. Was a really just cool design. They did some really interesting things with that drum. Yeah, exactly. That one right there, where it's funny, like internal mufflers are kind of like out of style these days, but they had a really neat way of integrating a drum, and it does just some interesting things. I remember watching Benny play. He did obviously some demos. He was there obviously at the NAMM show, and he had the two versions. He had the brass one and the updated version of his beach one. And it was really cool. I love that Sonar continually innovates. In fact, they're like have made some of the most, as far as I understand it, some of the biggest innovations in drum set technology, like double braced hardware and stuff. I could be wrong on some of these specifics, but I know Sonar has pioneered significant things in this area, and it's just one of the things I love so much about the drum company, aside from the fact that it obviously sounds amazing. Like it changed my life when I first heard Sonar drums and knew that's what I was listening to.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got a tattoo, so
Yeah.
I
think
these toms did that for me. It was literally these toms right in front of me that rarely come off my kit because they're my favorite.
We joked about it before, but it's kind of like when you get your child's handprint or footprint on your body, or their first drawing or something like that. That's
their first swear word.
I literally got it scaled exactly the same size as the SQ2 badge. Like I measured it, brought it over to my tattoo artist buddy. It was just like, I need this, and I need it somewhere I can't cover it up. So, neck.
He's in. Wow. He's in, folks.
He's in for life.
He's in. I love it. Now it would be guilty of Sonar, and I'm not gonna throw shade here. But if for any reason they do terminate any type of relationship, they're going to feel terrible about it.
Oh, they will. They'll feel bad about it.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. It's like, as far as I'm concerned, this is like acoustic perfection. Not that I expect I'm going to get dropped from the roster anytime soon. At least I hope not.
You're doing good stuff, bud.
I'd be playing these drums for the rest of my life, and I will be doing that, regardless of any sort of relationship I have with the company. But that being said, like we were talking about with the people, I legitimately feel like part of the family with these guys. It's an important part of my life.
That leads me to a good question, Aaron. I've talked to actually quite a few company owners, and I even had the chance at one time to talk to Roy Burns, who I got my endorsement through Roy. But one of the questions I often like to ask them is what they look for in endorsers, because the endorsement isn't necessarily we're going to give you free gear. Often endorsement often means there's very little free gear. I mean, free gear, let's face it, free gear goes to Dave Grohl. It goes to, you know what I mean? Like that, when you're talking these guys out there that think they're going to get free stuff. But what advice could you give, Aaron, and especially now with the internet, as a ton of Instagrammers and YouTubers and influencers, now that's where companies are turning their eye. There's far more visibility. What advice can you give to someone who's looking for a relationship or an endorsement with a drum company?
Good.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. There's several aspects to that particular question. I'll comment on how I feel like it worked for me.
Perfect.
I felt like in my situation, I was just so heavily passionate about the gear that I was playing. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, I'll just play any drums just because somebody wants to fucking give me 10% off or something. It was, I'm obsessed with these drums. And I think that passion showed through in everything that I was doing. And it's probably what got me on Scott's radar in the first place, to be just completely honest. Without that, like, just genuine love of this stuff, and of course, love of like music and, doing what I do on the instrument, I'm not sure an endorsement would have even made sense.
Just in regards to that, I was on a panel once when I worked for another company, Roland, and about specifically endorsement, and you said it exactly. The most important thing is that you need to be passionate about that product already, and then typically the manufacturer, you'll end up on their radar and they'll support you with that, and you will create a partnership. And I think, and at least I was battling it a lot when I was in my previous role, was that, hey, I'm a so-and-so person and I've never used your product before ever, but it seems like it's the best product. So why don't you give me one and I'll tell everybody how awesome it is. Right. And meanwhile, like, I'm going on Instagram or I'm everywhere just looking at people that are using it. And you said it way at the beginning, and I love it, is using things genuinely different and out of traditional methods of using something. I was like, that guy or that person is really cool. They're using it genuinely. And just a little bit more on that is that the manufacturer always obviously knows about products that are coming out later. And it made me think about when I knew, like, a year out when a new product was going to come out, it had on my radar, I'm like, that guy would be perfect for this new piece of gear that's coming out. So I'm going to contact them in advance because they're doing something different. Maybe they're triggering lights using their electronic drum kit, and we have a product coming out that does something along those lines. I'm like, okay, well, that guy is going to be perfect for this, or he's using a synth, or he's using whatever. Like, if you're already using the product, then you're already championing the brand. Then I want to support you and create content with you. Does that resonate with you? Yeah.
100%. And like, even on the opposite of that coin, one thing that I feel like is not helpful for people when they're trying to chase down endorsements and stuff is sending out just like a blanket letter to like 10 different companies of like, hey, I'm such and such, I'm doing this, give me some stuff. One thing that a lot of these people I feel like don't realize is that most people in the industry, like on the gear level of things anyway, they're all friends. They all talk.
Yeah.
And if these guys are all just like, hey, I got a letter from that guy too. I mean, everybody just like knows immediately there's nothing genuine behind this guy's intention with your company. And they'd probably leave you at the drop of a hat for 1% of a better deal through someone else. So that stuff is just chronically unhelpful. I also feel like there's a lot of just people have the wrong idea about endorsements. Like, it's not about getting cheap or free gear. It's about it's a symbiotic relationship where you are helping a company sell product. That maybe is saying a little bit too much and a little bit too just like frankly what it is, but you are helping these guys push a thing that they're making. And at the same time, they're helping you do what you're doing, which is supposed to be being a professional musician in some regard. I know nowadays it's a little different where social media is so big, and being a professional musician, the professional maybe isn't the adequate word for it, but like these have to match.
Changed
like,
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, like these things, like it has to go both ways. It can't just be like, oh, here I'm doing my shit, give me something.
It's a partnership, right? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And would you say, fair to say, Aaron, you're kind of not old in the age or in any way, but the older style of endorsement is that they're sort of enabling you to go on your path of this discovery, whatever it is. And it's always evolved. I always believe it's evolving too, but it seems to me that Sonar is the type of company that fits you well, that you're able to go off on, for lack of a better word, tangents or experimentation. It seems like it suits you as well. Like, if I expected to see what would he be playing, it would be probably Sonar, because they are so progressive in their thoughts.
That's true, but there's still also the fact that I am doing this and making a living at it. Like, even if I wasn't endorsing anything, I'm still like, I mean, I won't talk numbers or anything, but like, I have an incredible salaried position at Drumeo. If I wasn't doing these things, there would be no point in them helping me. If I was just like sitting around and like making an occasional Instagram post, I feel like that doesn't really bring value to the company. You know, I wouldn't be holding up my end of it if I wasn't sort of championing these things by actually doing something with it, you know?
And you're and to be absolutely real, and this is going to sound cheeseball, but you're just a cool guy. Like, it's very comfortable, I assume, for I assume it's very comfortable for I remember I was at NAMM a few years ago, and you were there signing autographs right next to Benny Greb and everybody else that happens to be sitting there. Like, you're personable, you're friendly, you represent brands honestly, and that says a lot about character. And I think that a lot of people that expect free gear forget that very integral part of the equation.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a people business, you know, like you have to interact with people, you have to work with people. Again, social media might be a slightly different tinge on that, but like, what do we do as musicians? We get in a room with other musicians and make music, right? If you can't be a cool hang, you're going to have some success maybe if you're like amazing, but it might be short-lived if nobody wants to hang out with you, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Unless maybe that's your marketing angle. Oh my God, that guy's the biggest jerk. I know. I love working with him. He's the jerkiest of jerks. I hate working with him.
He's like the Rick Rubin of drummers.
Exactly. He will tell you. I played in a band once where I was just like, every time the bass player made a mistake, I would just yell at the top of my lungs, "Weak, terrible!" Just any mistake. And I don't think he ever wanted to play with me ever again.
Is this the guy that called you the stenographer?
No, totally different band.
Okay.
I'm a character in every band that I play in, but I think that's what we are as entertainers, right? We have to be, especially as drummers. Let's be clear, we're at the back of the stage majority of the time, so we do need to draw some focus on us. Or like I was saying last stream, playing a show and then afterwards, people saying, "Oh my God, that band was amazing," and I'm like, "Yeah, that was me. I was drumming in that band." Oh, jeez.
Right.
Let's
this is digressing a little bit. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Sorry, Aaron. Curious. We've been talking about education, and I would be curious to know, Aaron, who kind of your biggest teachers were. They don't necessarily have to be drum teachers, but who really, really influenced you?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I've had like 2 formal drum teachers. One when I was a kid. His name's Flavio Flown. I stayed with him for just a couple of years when I was first starting. Then I spent, I think, about maybe 12 years with this guy, Kevin Radomski. His brother, Kyle Radomski, actually works at Drumeo with me. Super great guy. He really kind of just like, he helped me learn how to learn. I felt confident going off on my own when I was done with him. I shouldn't say done with him, but like when I decided to stop taking lessons, life just kind of got in the way. I was getting really busy. I was playing professionally. I was practicing and working on stuff obsessively. I just felt like going to my lesson every week at some point. He was giving me stuff that I could work on myself, and paths that I was kind of going down. I was just finding my own thing, Those were the actual like formal instructors I had. Other than like, musicians I've listened to and stuff, I think probably the most influential beyond any of that would have been probably Kenny Werner. Like what I learned in Effortless Mastery really turned a huge page for me. I wasn't even somebody that really liked books at the time, and I open up this book and find all the neurotic shit that was going on in my head as a musician just right there on the page. Cool. It kind of helped me grow up a lot, both on the kit and off the kit. Probably just as important as a lot of the drum lessons I ever took were from a piano player in a book that had no musical notation.
Yeah, neat.
Let me pull this up really quick, because you've mentioned it a few times tonight, as a matter of fact.
He's actually got
Mastery.
He's actually got a new book that just came out last month called Becoming the Instrument. That's awesome. In fact, somebody randomly gifted me a signed copy of it, and I don't know who. I posted on social media to please who sent me this, and nobody fessed up to it. So whoever actually got Kenny Werner to send me a signed copy, it was just like, "Hey, Aaron, enjoy." Thank you. That
was it Kenny?
It was a really cool day. It might have been. I actually messaged him about it, and he kind of just said, I don't know. So he may have been just kind of messing with me, and he might have done it, but nobody has said so. Yeah, totally. I kind of feel like it was him. I'd like to believe it was him, but I don't actually
know. You have a Valentine there, bud.
Yeah, apparently.
Way to go. Somebody who's not in the business of taking a spotlight on some charity work.
Yeah, very, very cool.
Oh, Jared, you're welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah, Jared. Yeah, it was obviously him. Obviously him.
Perfect.
Oh shoot!
I appreciate it, my friend.
That's amazing. Effortless Mastery. So you highly recommend this book in particular. This is the basis of a lot of your foundation.
This should be something that should be in every musician's catalog. Like, it's not like the end all for like the mental game on music, but like if you haven't really explored it, this is the perfect place to start.
Great.
Cool.
It's a book that the world really needs. It was not written by a philosopher or academic. Okay, perfect. Yeah. It's a good definition. Oh, Quincy Jones actually said that. Oh, that's why. Quincy Jones actually.
Yeah, he's okay. He's done a few things.
He's a big nobody. He's a big nobody. Yeah, that's too bad. I feel like we should maybe.
We missed a good question though. I think
this one right here.
Yes, that one.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question.
What is your process in choosing the right drumstick, weight, length, and wood tips versus nylon tips?
Oh, okay. This took me a long time, and a big part of it was just trial and error. One of the things that I did way back in the day, this was when I was really starting to get obsessed with hand technique. I was heavily working on Charlie Wilcoxon books. At the time, I was hyper focused on German grip, so back of the hands on top, learning how to make my fingers do the things that they needed to do in that position. Again, as efficiently as possible, trying to let gravity and rebound do the significant amount of the work while I'm just kind of guiding the stick. What I learned while working on this stuff is that certain things felt different if I had a different type of stick, like whether it was a different thickness, a different type of wood, a different length, a different taper length, how actually thick it gets at the end, the shape of the tip, the material of the tip. These all change how the drumstick feels in your hands and how it reacts and responds on different instruments of the drum set. Now, this is one of those things where everybody's body is different, everybody's hands are different. But the more things that you try, and the way that I did that is I'd go to the store and I'd just like get my hands on a bunch of different pairs, pick a few that I maybe hadn't tried, and just buy a few pairs of each of them and just get to work on the practice pad with them and try to really just like internally pay attention to what it felt like when these variables were changed. Like, how does a different taper change what's happening on the drums when I do such and such a thing? From doing this, I learned that I really like a pretty heavy stick. I want something that's rigid and doesn't really flex. I want something that is pretty heavy. Now, I know a lot of people shy away from heavy sticks because they feel like they can't play quietly. But I actually feel like heavy sticks help me play quietly better because I can really feel what's going on with the drum. This probably only works if you hold really loose and can actually like really feel the vibrations in the pads of your fingers and stuff. But also another benefit to having a really heavy stick is that getting more volume takes less effort for you. So it's easier to play quiet and takes less effort to play loud. I felt like that just helped me achieve what I wanted to as efficiently as possible. Now, this isn't saying that's like the right way to do it. This is saying that's the way that made the most sense to me. And I just doubled down on it. And I just kept trying sticks over several years until I found ones that kind of just felt like these really just fit my hands. These kind of execute how I want them to execute. And I kind of have two main sticks. Funnily enough, they're both signature sticks and neither of them are mine. There's the Virgil Donati's Assault, which is a hickory stick. It's roughly a 2B. It's slightly short as far as a 2B is concerned. It's got a really short taper and a barrel tip, wood tip. I'm sure they make it in nylon as well, but I don't like how that sounds on cymbals. I like dark, lush tones, and nylon gives you a real bright ping. It's just not for me. It's definitely for a lot of people, it's not for me. And then the B stick that I like, so like when that's maybe a little too heavy, because it can tend to sound a little barbaric on cymbals, especially if you're using a really thin ride cymbal. That's going to sound like a crash if you're riding on it with this like heavy 2B with a big tip and no flex. So the second stick that I really like is the Tim Alexander stick. And it's almost the same length. It's almost the same diameter. It's got a very similar taper, but it tapers down to a really tiny bead tip, and it's in maple. So those two changes, being a maple stick and having a really tiny tip, affect the feel in some pretty significant ways. It's a lot lighter. I still feel like I get that same kind of aspect of I can really feel what's happening on the drums because it's still pretty thick, and it still does have some heft because it's like 2B as far as the diameter is concerned, roughly. But it sounds really just pretty on cymbals. So like if I'm playing something and the assaults are just like smashing my ride cymbal, that's a great alternate. Those are kind of the two that I typically go back and forth from.
And do you ever use any type of mallet or brush or roots, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, again, kind of like my ridiculous snare collection. I love options. I have all sorts of ridiculous stuff. In fact, you know what? I have my favorite brushes here, and there's a stupid story behind these.
Awesome.
I like it.
I like stupid stories.
I love stupid stories. We should create a segment, stupid stories.
Yeah. I found these at a gig. Somebody threw them away because they were so beat up. These are plastic brushes that are supposed to be the type of things where like the tip should look like this, just a tight thing, but they are just so frayed that I remember seeing these on the ground and I sat down and I played something with them and they just gave me this really fat, just like on the drums that I hadn't really heard on any other type of stick. And I've not been able to buy something that sounds like this. I've had these for probably 20 years.
Yeah.
They're wrecked as hell. And they're just like, probably sounds terrible on my phone, but like there's just a thing that they do that I've never heard another brush do, and they were literally garbage. So yeah, I have all sorts of variations. I probably have 100 different types of like brushes and mouths and other ridiculous shit in the other room just because I like sounds. I like when things are different. I like when things surprise me. I don't like doing the same thing all the time. As much as I've been playing those assaults for probably 20 years, I typically like changing stuff up.
Oh, I like that. Here Scott's got a question. Here we go. Aaron, your setup often lends well or facilitates to an open-handed or strong ambidextrous approach to playing. Was this something that was encouraged by a teacher earlier on, and in addition to that, or an influential artist, or something that naturally progressed along your own path of learning and exploring? Ambidexterity or symmetry in your drums. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Funnily enough, this is one of the things that I started at Drumeo 10 years ago doing. We started out with an ambidexterity just set of lessons. And it's actually kind of a silly story how I got into this as well. It was an influential artist. I was watching Travis Orban videos, and he plays open-handed with like pretty symmetrical but extremely minimal kit. He has like a 12-inch tom here, 16-inch tom there, just a kick and a snare drum. That's it for drums. And I'm a big kit guy, so I really liked watching him shred around in this thing because he's amazing with it. Now, funny thing is I remember one day I was just like, I'm just going to try this. And I was teaching that night. So I used to teach upstairs, and I had 2 kits there. And so I decided I was going to just set my kit up left-handed. I know this is like not quite at ambidexterity yet. We're going to get there in a second. So I just flipped my kit around, and I saw Travis doing a whole bunch of like straight up lefty stuff. And I was like, that's dope. And I probably can't do that very well. So let's just try it out. First couple of students that come in were all beginners. And I was like, this is cool. I can play everything that I need to show them left-handed without trying. And I've never really done anything like this before. But then my third student that came that day was a little bit more of an advanced guy. And I fell on my face a little bit when I was trying to demonstrate something. He was sympathetic to it. And obviously I made do. But at the same time, it was just kind of like, that's interesting. So over the course of the next couple of weeks of teaching, it went from being a full lefty kit to a mirrored kit. Kind of like what I got here right now, where maybe without all the ridiculous toms, but I probably had 2 kicks, snare drum, a tom on each side, hi-hats on each side, just so I could, like, let's say I got to demonstrate something and I can't just do it left-handed, even though I wanted to do it left-handed. I've got basically a right-handed kit and a left-handed kit at the same time, so I can just flip over and do it like nothing was weird. Nobody had to know. And that's actually how it started. It just became like kind of a fun game that I was playing in my lessons from watching Travis Orban videos that I started exploring on the drum kit. And then that also kind of blended over into my big kits, where this actually still kind of looks like one, but it's rotated by about maybe 15, 20 degrees, where I used to, when I first tried this, I had like the 8-inch tom right in the middle, and I was making the toms descend out of order. So it was like 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, etc., just as I was going down. My thought was that I could do doubles down these, and it would descend like I was doing singles down a normal descending kit. But over the years, it's like I wrote a bunch of third ion stuff that way. So I had like big toms on each side and kind of smaller toms in the middle, which comes out a certain way when you play things. Not by any particularly conscious choice, but my kits have kind of done that forever. In fact, like I was saying at the beginning of this show, the last time I set up a big kit, this one, I just reversed my rack toms. But guess what? If you look at it, it still does that. It's basically like 8, 10, 15, 13, 18. Like, it's not exactly descending out like this, but it's actually kind of close. I've got small toms in the middle and big toms spread out.
I kind of see it here. You got the small tom in the middle there. Yeah.
Cool.
And that helps towards ambidexterity is having voicings on either side of you for orchestrations. Yeah.
Well, I considered it like having a right-handed kit and a left-handed kit at the same time.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I think I think that forces you to engage that side of your body more often. You know, I often see with drummers who just have the typical setup, there's nothing to engage the left hand unless they're encouraged to do it themselves with some kind of left hand independence. But often I see, like just if you have, say, for example, the bottom setup, like minus the timpani drums, but there is no reason to do the left-handed at all in many aspects, and I think that's a good thing to encourage that. Like you said, I mean, you totally humbled yourself in front of the semi-advanced student. I mean, as much as you might have duffed it, it probably was a great lesson for yourself and for the student.
It sure was, and it in weird ways evolved into this crap like 15 years later or whatever.
Yeah,
man. Well, we're going on about 2.5 hours. I feel like we should wind her down here really quickly because it's getting late for you.
Wow, time has flown. That's great.
It has. But I want to quick fire a couple things to you. If there isn't any question, we'll open it up for some more questions quickly here, if anybody has any follow-ups. But I always I've got some questions here, so I'm gonna pull a question here, and you're gonna answer it. Ready?
Okay, let's do it.
Random question from the topic box. Here we go. Oh, that's coincidental. Yeah. Oh, you may not be able to. What was your most memorable meal ever? Wow, coincidental. Nice. We have a recipe. We have a recipe segment, so we can bypass that recipe segment in favor of this question. Go for it. Your favorite meal. It can be. Let me double down on it. If you're not thinking, when you were a child, when you were little Aaron, little Aaron,
Aaron,
when you were little Aaron, and what was it that you were turning on your morning cartoons, or you rushed home to get dinner? Was there a meal that your mom made or that somebody made and that resonated heavy with you, that thinks of good times? Is there a good recipe that resonates?
Nothing is particularly jumping to mind, but while I was sitting here thinking, I did come up with something. There was a challenge that a friend of mine posed to me once, that I couldn't go a year without buying drums. And if I did, he was going to take me to the most expensive steakhouse in Winnipeg, 529. And I won that bet specifically because I had the goal of like having a $200 steak. That was probably the most memorable meal I've ever had. And yes, it was damn near impossible not to buy gear. And actually, fun fact, the girl I was dating at the time, I sort of cheated on this bet because
here we go.
She bought me a couple of snare drums.
I already thought of the loophole.
Loophole,
yeah.
But technically, I didn't buy those drums.
No,
fucking custom ordered them.
But if you said, "Hey, I'm dangling $200 here. If you manage to take it and go buy a snare drum and put it in my bag, then it's not my fault. I didn't buy it. You bought it with my money, but I didn't buy it."
So Marty, if you're watching, I'm sorry I kind of cheated on that bet, but I did not buy those drums. So
that's amazing. But a $200 steak. That steak tasted good. Oh, I love steak.
It was
steak.
Unbelievable. I have never had a steak that good since. Well, yeah, probably never since. I did go to a really amazing steakhouse in Miami in January, but I think the 529 one was still just a touch better.
Oh, I love it. Let's do J6 Studios, and then I've got a couple questions for on the way out. Sorry, you're already on it. How do you play something like 13/16, 15/16? How do you, in your head, how are you breaking down those subdivisions and applying it?
Here's the thing. There are two ways to feel 16th note meters. And I mean that. There's only two. I don't care what 16th note meter you come at me with. Here's the thing. A 16th note meter only makes sense if it is either 1/16th note longer or shorter than a more simple meter. Let's take an example. You said 13/16 or 15/16. So if we take 13/16, it is 1/16th note longer than 3/4, which is 12/16th notes long. 1, 2, 3, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. One extra 16th note gets you 13/16. So if I'm just thinking about 3, 4, boom, bat, bat, boom, bat, bat, all I'm thinking about is that plus a weird kind of skip that's an additional 16th note long. So if I play something that kind of feels a little bit more like 16th notes, it's like boom, bat, boom, boom, bat, boom, boom, 2, 3. Now I don't necessarily subdivide it as like 4, 4, 5. You can put the extra note anywhere in your phrasing, but that's how you would feel it. Now it's also shorter than 7, 8. So if you're thinking about like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 14 16th notes in total. It is 1/16th note shorter than that.
Okay.
Let's take the same idea and talk about 15/16. 15/16 is, in my opinion, one of the easier ones because it's one that you can directly relate to 4/4. It's a 16th note short of 4/4. So if we've got 4/4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1/16th note less than that gets you 15/16. So you can think about it as like 3 quarter notes and then a group of 3/16. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. 1 and a 2. These aren't necessarily the most musical ways to play these, but these are great building blocks to first start thinking about it. And again, you can put that sort of like cut somewhere in your phrasing, and it's probably going to sound cooler if it's not just at the end. It's cool just at the end if this is new to you and you're just getting the feel of how this time signature works. But as you get comfortable with it, you can start really playing around with it. One of my favorite things to do in 15/16 is to break it up into groups of 3/16. So it can almost feel like 5/4 in triplets. It's not triplets, but anyway, this is getting off into weird sort of like rhythm freak territory, but you can evenly subdivide 15 notes by 3. So if you're still going 1, 2, and 3,
right,
and
yeah.
1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. If you're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, I've got this straight pattern going over top of it by using every third 16th note. There's some very cool things you can do with that, and it almost disguises the fact that you're playing in this really awkward 16th meter. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's got that weird skip because you're giving it something normal, even though that normal thing is polyrhythmic to your quarter note.
Right.
That is a perfect elevator pitch. And if everybody caught it, awesome. If they didn't, then they should be subscribing to you on Drumeo Coaches.
That's right. Rhythm in Prague debuts on Thursday.
Exactly. They should also be checking out your book, which, by the way, I had it up here. I'm sorry. Progressive Drumming Essentials.
That's right. That's if you want to get real weird. Modern Drummer let me just be as crazy as I wanted in that book. And I'm not going to lie to you. It's nuts. There's some stuff in there that I don't expect most people to ever get through. Like maybe 1% of the people that buy this book. I'm not saying it's impossible. I can play everything that's in that book. But this is from like decades of just like diving into like what happens when I fuck with all the rules in rhythm theory. That's what this book's about.
This is the advanced angle of things. This is
great.
That's
the I'm not going to hold your hand version. I'll show you all the tools, but it's a journey.
Perfect. Yeah, the empowerment book. Oh, I love that. Martin says, you told me anyway, the $50 poutine was the thing. Oh, $50 poutine. Good Lord, I love poutines. Okay, if there's no more questions, the Mama's Recipe you got, this segment here, I'm not a Beatles fan, but I'm not a big Beatles fan. But do you have a favorite Beatles song that maybe you go to?
I'm probably going to get some flack for this. I hate the Beatles. They're one of my least favorite bands of all time.
Okay. Perfect. We're both okay. Nice. Let's not alienate our group too much here.
I'm sorry to anybody that likes it. It's just not for me. And I feel like regardless of how much I dislike it, I'm indirectly inspired by it because I'm sure the vast majority of people I'm inspired by love the friggin' Beatles. So I don't have to like it. So many people like them enough for me.
Yeah, they're been liked enough.
Yeah. They're liked. I like it.
I'm gonna get hate for that one, aren't I?
No, I get hate for it every single stream, so it's totally fine. Liberty DeVito was prepared to like shut down the stream when I said that. I won't make you answer what the most unique snare sample you have. That's interesting.
I guess I do have an answer for that. I mean, I have a 20x9 snare drum made by, at the time, 78 Customs, which they eventually changed their name to Greenfield Customs. I have a sample of that I've used on some things, but I don't typically sample stuff. Now, that's not necessarily true because in really techie prog music, it's cleaner recording if you've got samples as well. So one of the things that I will do is multi-sample my kit, and like obviously like I still record drums when I'm playing on the Third Eye on records, but sometimes because there's so many inputs, that's a ton of extra noise. Gates can start to sound a little bit ugly. So for clarity, especially on toms and stuff, when there's just like a massive guitar as you're trying to get through, I'll also layer samples on top of that and just blend them in just a little bit so you get a little bit more of that clear definition, and it's still the performance I played. So yeah, I don't typically use samples so much, but those are sort of two of the ways I would.
Yeah, that's a great way to use them.
Very much so. Okay, well, let's wind her down here then. This is
cool.
This
has been a ton of fun, guys.
I appreciate you hanging out with you tonight. It was awesome. You got a new car today.
I did. I almost forgot about that. We've been talking about drums for so long. Holy shit, I got a new car.
You got a new car. The one thing that we didn't get into, but I'm going to pull it up very, very quickly here just so that people know what's going on in your life. Hold on one second. It's very important to me that I pull this up. Is this. Hold on.
Oh, yeah. I've been teaching myself how to do latte art.
Aaron is killing it. For the record, he's killing it at latte art. And I've talked to you about wanting to have you on my stream with the Retrologists. I want you to show us some latte art. Sadly, you're gonna have to make like 5 or 6 of them or more, and then
I'm
probably
totally
drink
down
them.
with that.
But I want you to
down with that.
What got you into the latte art, and is it something you're obviously practicing as well? What got you into it?
Well, I actually kind of got into the latte art by accident. Oh, hold on a sec. I just got a really funny text that I can't really give you the full details of, but there's a sample that I use in a band I've played with for a long time called Drum versus Bass. And we took a really, really disgusting video. We sampled this horrible thing that happened into it and really twisted it up in Native Instruments' Absinthe. So it's this crazy stereo, I think it was like a 16-bar phrase that was just, anyway. I have used samples in really creatively disgusting ways. Anyway, back to latte art.
That's what he was looking for. I love it. Yes.
Yeah, hilarious. Okay, so maybe 2.5 years ago, I stopped going to Starbucks just because I'd been paying them twice a day for overpriced coffee that occasionally I would get annoyed that was made kind of poorly. Yep. And I, bought myself a crappy little espresso machine. Definitely not the one you're looking at in that picture. That is an extremely nice espresso machine. But after I'd been 2 years Starbucks free and saved about $6,000 from not going to Starbucks, I decided, hey, I'm going to splurge on a ridiculous espresso setup for my place. So I got this, which is a Rocket Giotto, and all the bells and whistles for it. I won't say how much I spent on all that stuff, but it's almost embarrassing. It's actually more than I just spent on this car. But part of that is because I got something that's like boutique cafe level stuff. It can also froth milk really appropriately. So I went down a YouTube rabbit hole of like how to make the best lattes. And on that same rabbit hole, you see people making these really crazy designs. And it's just like in how you pour the milk. Like one hand's got the cup of espresso, one hand's got this cup of steamed milk that you've done. And from getting that milk into the cup for your drink, you can just dump it in there. Or you can do it like this. Because I make myself like 3 to 5 of these things a day, it's like, free practice. So every day today, like maybe 2 weeks ago, I started working on a new design. Before I was just doing, I think they call them tulips. It was like the first one that I was kind of working on. This one that you see in the picture is kind of a poorly done Rosetta, but it's got some positives. I was getting better at stretching my designs out to more widely fill the cup, getting a little bit better at the kind of wave that makes it look like it's got leaves and stuff. But it's been fun. It's a more involved dynamic art form than I expected it to be. You'd think it would just be kind of easy. You're pouring something in a cup, it tastes good, it looks good, but there's a ton of subtlety to A, how you prepare that milk, and B, how you actually pour it. It's been humbling. My first bunch of these were absolutely awful, but little steps at a time, they were just like getting a little bit better. And I actually made my first Rosetta by accident. It was funny. I watched a video by this chick, Emily Bryant. She's amazing. If you want to get into latte art, check that chick out on YouTube. She's great.
Pots. Yeah, nice.
So I watched this video trying to learn how to make a heart, and I screwed it up super badly. But what came out was this actually like pretty good Rosetta by accident. So I pivoted from going to hearts next and just started working on those. And this is not the best I've done of it so far, but that's the best one I did this morning.
How does it feel to be? And this is the whole the whole reason I really brought this up is that you're restarting as a student of something, and you're going through the stages of investigating how other people do it, the best places to get the information. You're evaluating your own efforts and calibrating. How does it feel to be a student of something but taking it seriously? Because I really get the impression you enjoy doing this and you really want to do this properly.
100%. I really love developing skills. Like there are probably, let's just say 3 things in my life that I kind of do this with. Now, this is probably going to come out wrong, but I feel like there's not a lot left for me to discover on drums. So that has been kind of depressing. Like there's been a couple years where it's been like almost a little hard. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm still very passionate about drumming, and obviously love my job and do so many really fun things with this. It's like I built the coolest life for myself around it. But that discovery was kind of getting a little bit lost. Remember before we were talking about how discovery is really important for some people?
Yeah.
I say that out of sheer experience where it's a driving force in my life. So finding something new like this, where it's like an actual like art form that has like subtlety and challenges to it, I actually love diving in and learning how to do this, even though it's like this silly little skill. It doesn't even matter. I'm never going to try and go work in a coffee shop, but it's actually just fun to like go from barely being able to get this this milk into a cup in a way that like just doesn't look like a blob to it actually like shit, it actually looks really good. And even in other things, like I'm a competitive handgun shooter, and like in that there's so much that I find similar with how I train my body to do things on drums to how I train to run through IPSC and USPSA courses with an open gun. I feel like discovery is one of the most important driving factors in my life. So I got it on drums, even though it's kind of winding down a little bit. I got it in IPSC, and I got it in, it feels silly to say it, but latte art.
No, not silly at all. It's a cool skill. This segues into my final question, as a matter of fact. Sean, are you good?
I think, but I have one thing to add. I think it would be a great addition to your channel if you were to just go into a Starbucks and just start making a coffee, like, but record it. Like, my wife was a coffee master. I've got an apron. I can mail it to you. Just fucking show up and like jump behind the counter.
Amazing.
I think that'd be hilarious.
That would be really funny. I wonder how long it would be before they kicked me out of there.
Yeah, well, I think you could be in there for a while.
So somebody would be like, "This guy's actually doing really good." But it is a good point of like marketing. Like if you have that skill, then and we know certainly lots of other people that are drummers and have other skills. It's almost like really cool to see them out of their element.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's why we keep asking for recipes. I want to, I would love to get Liberty's mom's meatball recipe. I really would.
It'd be really
and
good.
who wouldn't want to cook that fucking thing? Because that's like probably hundreds of years old.
Oh,
Probably
man, I love
incredible.
it. Yeah. But it does segue. Sean, are we cool going into my final question?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So, Aaron, you've known me long enough that you know that at every drum clinic, I always ask the same question. Do you remember what that question is?
It's been a long time since I've heard you ask it, but I vividly remember what you're talking about. It's
I'll go with it. It's easy to put our heroes on a pedestal, but they seem more human when we see them fail. So, can you demonstrate something? And you happen to be sitting behind the drum kit, so maybe it could be drum related. Can you demonstrate something that you have not perfected so that we can see you fail, and then you can talk a little bit about the challenges you're going through to perfect that?
Well, we just talked about it in latte art. Man, there's so much of that sucks. Like, I mean, obviously I don't post every one that I do. Like for every one that I put on Instagram, there's probably 6 drinks that I made myself that just look like a blobby piece of shit. I mean, they taste delicious, but it's one of those things where it's like, it can be a little disheartening when you're just like, okay, I know how to do this. Actually, after that first Rosetta that I accidentally did when I was trying to do a heart, the next one, awful. It didn't look anything like a Rosetta. That's one of those things where like everybody is a beginner at something. Maybe not at some point in their life anyway. Like we all go through that stuff. And I agree, like seeing people fail gives it a little bit more of a human quality, you know? I mean, that may be the wrong words for it, but like you feel like you can relate to that person because everybody's failed. There's not a single person out there that succeeded at every single thing that they've tried. And if they did, they built zero character getting there. Because if you don't fail at anything, like you're not going to learn anything really. You're just like, oh, I happened to try this thing that worked out great. Sure, I've tried a lot of things that just happened to work out great, but I've failed countless times in the pursuit of anything that's been important to me, you know?
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
And just on that, so now you're with the latte art, you're driving yourself more to perfect it. I say perfect, but we know just you're on the journey. And what mentally, how are you dealing with that, and what facilities, like what are you hunting down to get that information more clear, right?
Here's the thing that's, I think, important. With music, because I do this for a living, there's stakes. Like, it has more importance internally to succeeding at something. Like, that adds kind of a level of stress to doing things. Not necessarily like I feel stressed out when I'm drumming or whatever, but like, you guys know what I mean. Like, it feels shitty when you screw something up for really no reason. Because think about it, when you were first starting drums, just hitting the damn things were amazing. It was just like, oh my God, I could make a sound with these things. Something that would have been considered a fail was actually just like fun for the experience of doing that thing. The thing that I like with latte art is that it doesn't fucking matter. I'm making myself a goddamn coffee. I'm going to do it several times today. Half the time it's not going to look good, but guess what? It's delicious. There's an amazing reward at the end anyway. Like, it doesn't matter to me if it's not good. It's no risk because I legitimately don't care. Like, there are no stakes because it just doesn't matter. Cool. And the thing that I think that's important about what I just said is that in anything that you're learning and in anything that you're working on, if you start to get stressed out or like freaked out by the fact that you're making mistakes, you're probably taking it or yourself too seriously in some sort of way. Now, yes, there are places in your life where you got to actually, like, force yourself to, grit your teeth and get through something and make sure you do it well. I'm not discounting that. But I am saying, if you're finding yourself getting stressed out by doing something, try to assess why it's important to you and maybe trying to connect with the fact that it probably doesn't matter. Like, even on the drums, even when it's your job, even if we're on stage, raise your hand if you fuck something up on stage. The three of us are professional musicians.
Totally, yep.
Does it matter? No. The best musicians, wow, this is the wrong way of saying it, but like, musicians that I feel like are mentally well adjusted usually laugh. The ones that take themselves too seriously get all like about it,
Yeah, good.
You can choose how you interpret that moment. It doesn't have to be stressful.
Thank you, Aaron. Dude, thank you. This has been a lot of fun. We didn't get to Mario Kart. We'll do that next time. You and I will play some Mario Kart. Yeah, we'll play some Mario Kart.
And maybe a snare in the latte. I'd be impressed as fuck with that.
Oh, dude.
It's actually really funny. I totally forgot about this, but when I first started doing latte art, one of my goals was to do like a really fancy Sonar logo in latte art. I'm not good enough to do this yet, but one day you're going to see that on my Instagram.
Scott.
At some point. Yeah.
Do a kick pedal or something. I just want to see that.
There you go.
That's really, really good.
Do your whole kit. Do your whole kit in the latte art. Come on.
I don't have a big enough cut.
And by the way, you can't just put like a stencil on top and pour cinnamon on top of it. It doesn't work. I tried.
You could use a bowl though, Aaron. You could use a bowl.
That's a good point. I'm gonna have to make a lot of espresso, but I am totally up for that.
Dude, I want you to come on my stream, and we'll do a hangout, and you'll teach a bit about the processes and the steps you've gone through to learn that. Tonight in particular was super valuable, whether it's latte art, whether it's drumming, whether it's life lessons or whatever. It's all applicable of the process of learning, the challenges of learning, overcoming failure, and you hit all those main points tonight. Dude, thank you so much.
Oh, man. Thanks for having me. This has been like a really, really fun hangout, and I apologize for being like 20 minutes late.
You bought a car. It's totally good.
It's true.
Yeah, it's totally good. Okay, well, let's wind her down here, Sean. Do you have something, anything going on? What are we doing in our lives?
Yeah, if anyone's interested, join us on Friday. We're gonna have Rich Redmond on the show. Rich is
love Rich.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Former Sonar player, so he's not as cool now, but whatever.
Yeah.
So Rich is the drummer for Jason Aldean, but Rich has his own podcast. He's got a ton of books. He's an actor now, and he's actually, I don't know if many people knew this, but Rich started his career playing Latin music in Miami, and he studied at Texas A&M, and he's got a lot more to his skill set than he ever lets anyone into. We also have Nate Morton coming up, and he's been a guy I've wanted to talk to forever. Nate is the drummer for The Voice. Don't hate him because of that, but he's got some amazing talent, and he's got so many cool things on the go right now. He was a Paul Stanley's drummer at one time, played for Madonna. And then we also have, we got the GOAT coming up,
GOAT.
who I don't know a ton about. So, Paul, I'll hand that to you for a second there.
The GOAT is a phenomenal techno artist. Originally a drummer, electronic artist, and now considers himself an electronic artist with drumming background. Phenomenal techno artist. We're going to talk a bit about programming drums. Cool. And talk about application of samples and looking at techno and electronic music from a drummer's perspective and how he tracks drums and everything. So if you're an electronic musician, whether you use drum machines or you use Ableton or you whatever soft synths you're using, the GOAT is going to be who you're going to want to tune in to check out. Very cool guy.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that then. And then, of course, we already had Lib and Dom on, so you can check out our archives. If you want to check us out online, it's www.drumgeek.com, and then you can find our vodcast through the website.
You got it. There you go. And last but not least, Aaron wasn't 20 minutes late. He simply bent space and time continuum.
I love that.
There you go.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Let's close it down here. Thanks, dude. And Aaron, stay on the line, and we'll do the old what's called in the industry the old back patting, where we tell ourselves how great we did tonight. Thank you very much. Cheers.
See everybody.
Bye.